Waiting for Al and Jules.
Yes.
So we have a quorum?
Yes,
Because I think we should start on time.
we have 8.
Shall we just begin, or what do you want to do here? I don't want people to wait. Okay, so it's 6:30. Let's begin the September meeting of the Surveying Complaint Review Board. Call it to order. We have a quorum. Any objections to calling the meeting into session, notwithstanding the fact that we're still expecting 2 people? We're okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is our first evening meeting in quite a while, and certainly our first meeting out of 100 Church Street, or whatever office there is for the Surveying Complaint Review Board in quite a while. And this is going to be the first of many, that we are planning. We're planning to be in Brooklyn next month, hopefully in the Bronx the month after, and we're going to rotate throughout the city and have evening meetings so that people can come without having to leave work, and we can be in the communities where hopefully people will be have the opportunity to come and talk publicly and comment on our actions and our activities. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Khalid, who arranged this meeting here and did a lot of work to put it together. As I also want to thank Brian Connell, who is here and who made a lot of the arrangements, along with the Staten Island Borough Hall people. The names I have are Allison Cohen and Bob McFeely. Is that right?
Yes.
And right, both.
McFeely.
Sorry?
McFeely,
right, Bob McFeely. We thank you very much for helping us with the logistics of making this meeting possible in compliance with the open meetings law, and having it live streamed and taking the measures that are necessary for all the logistics of that process. Do we have a motion to adopt the minutes from the last meeting in August? And July. Sorry, I thought we did July and August, didn't we?
No, I have a chance to review.
Oh, okay. Well, we have a motion for July and August. Thank you, Chris.
Second.
Any objection? Okay, they're adopted. Let's go to new business, first of all. And under this new business section, I would like to call upon each of the chairs of the various subcommittees to give reports on progress of the subcommittee activities which we undertook at the last meeting. I'll do that in a moment, but first of all I wanted to say that we have decided, or at least I believe the board has agreed, but if there's any discussion of this, I'm completely open to it, and we can discuss it right here, to hold the video bystander study, because in looking at the drafts, I felt, and I think others felt as well, that it was not based on enough data, and there was a lot more data available than just the first 6 months of this year. I would like very much to have a more thorough and rigorous study that looks at this problem from the point of view of videos during the last probably year or year and a half or 2 years, depending on what the data, what the basis of the hard data is available.
Do we have any idea what the number will go from for the 6-month period and to the 1-year period, or to the 1.5-year period?
Well, it'll certainly go down as you go backwards, but it's probably going to be pretty close to an arithmetic amount. So we only had 13 or 14 in the period that we were looking at so far, and we just didn't figure we didn't feel that was enough to draw hard and fast conclusions. Certainly not enough to do regression analysis of the various factors that go along with problems with video recording of arrests. And we wanted to, for training purposes and for other purposes, we wanted to be able to do statistical analysis so that we would have some kind of at least semi-reliable, raw predictive data on what types of activities can be associated with wrongful or misconduct during videoing of arrests. The theory being that that's good for training purposes, that's good for predictive purposes, and that serves everybody's effort to try and curb this practice. And we also wanted to, just to one more thing, we also wanted to expand the study in some sense, or at least look at the possibility of expanding the study in the sense of making it more than just a video bystander study, perhaps bringing into it, if it's appropriate, the real bystander problem, which has existed forever, where police officers' authority is questioned during an arrest, and the person questioning authority, other than the focus of the arrest, the bystander, becomes the subject of an arrest or of a police action. So I think bystander videos are a subcategory of a larger issue that we were hoping to look at, and I think there were public comments. I think Chris Dunn made some comments about it at the last meeting, and I think it's been a long-standing issue. I know from my experience it's been a long-standing issue, and it's something that I think can be more rigorously looked at than putting out a study about a subcategory which doesn't have a lot of statistical underpinnings. So with that, we wanted to table it. I don't want to delay it a long time. I hope it'll be out. I hope we can do something within a month or 6 weeks, but that's yet to be determined. I just don't think we ought to put out a product that we can't think is as helpful as something we could do as long as we're in this area.
Anecdotally, I mean, from all the cases that I've reviewed over all these number of years, it doesn't appear to me that the sampling is going to get much larger, even if we expand to a year or a year and a half. And it may be that statistically, the sampling that we get when we look at a year or even 2 years, it may not be a significant enough sample to validate the findings of the study.
That may be right, but that would only be for the video portion of it, and the video portion of it, of course, is important, but it also, the bystander aspect of it, I think, will be a much larger sample size. Pure bystander.
My thought was that I thought we were doing this with a view toward it becoming a heavy-duty training issue for the police department.
Well, it already is. As you know, they put out a recent regulation that made it, they so-called re-clarified what they had previously said.
Right.
And of course, there's a lawsuit pending on this issue in federal court.
Right.
So I don't think there's any lack of direction from the administration that police officers are not supposed to be interfering unless there's some very specific causation or exception to the basic rule with people who are videoing arrests. The issue now is documenting it and being able to hopefully help the training process by predicting what factors go into the abuse of conduct when it occurs. That's the hope of what our study is going to reveal, I hope. Unless there are any further comments on that, I'd like to proceed to reports from the committees.
Is this portion of the meeting considered new business?
Well, I mean, it could be old. I mean, it's new business in that it's a report on what the committees are doing, and that I think is not.
Okay, because I mean, we detracted from the agenda, obviously.
Well, on the agenda, as I saw it, there wasn't any the reports, committee reports. Well, we can do it that way. I thought that the public would be interested in where we are on this as soon as possible.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
Good.
there were some other issues.
Welcome to Jules Martin joining us.
Sorry, I'm a little.
It's all right.
But see, I thought there were some other issues that I wanted to raise that belong rightfully under new business.
Well, let's do that first then.
You want to do that first?
Sure.
Okay.
Feel free to raise them.
I think there are some policy issues that have been in effect long-term in this agency. And I'm a member of this board for going on 18 years now. And we always had a policy where each member of the 13 members that comprise this board, we all have one vote, and we all consult with each other when someone has a new idea and someone wants to bring up an issue. It seems that we've gotten away from that. Since you've been named as the chair of this board, things have been coming hot and heavy, and it seems to be done solely based on what you perceive to be the way we should be proceeding with this. There's no consultation. Meetings have been held. Board members have not been notified. And this is not the way we've done business in the past. And quite frankly, I feel kind of that I've been let out of this. I don't know how other board members feel, but that's the way I feel. And then the whole issue, I mean, we have the other whole issue that we can talk about. Probably we should be doing that in executive session. We can discuss that later. But I think we have to get back to, if you have an idea, that's wonderful. When you came to the first meeting that we held, the emergency meeting, you presented a list of things, and I thought you had some great ideas. But that has to be discussed amongst board members. You had several meetings with the police commissioner's office, none of which any of us were invited to. And I feel kind of left out because I was always invited to those meetings as a police representative, and I think importantly I should be there. Or not myself, or Jules, or Rudy, but one of us should be there. So I think that, and then I think Al Grant's email really speaks to the whole issue. You know, he said it a lot better than I could, and I would agree with him wholeheartedly. You know, we're going to get ourselves in a lot of trouble if we don't follow the policy and don't follow the way we have done things in the past. You know, I know you're looking to reinvigorate this agency, but we have to proceed cautiously and I think a little more slowly.
Anybody else have anything to say? Let's go to the committee reports. Mediation committee. We have, I know that Jim is going to give that report. Great.
Yes, Jeanette Cortez Gomez is the chair of the subcommittee, and she prepared this report, which I'm going to present. So the mediation subcommittee is motivated and anxious to increase the number of successfully mediated cases. In keeping with the general policies of confidentiality and with the awareness that mediation is voluntary, our goals include training all investigators and APU attorneys, not just mediators or intake personnel, increasing the number of available mediators, obtaining off-site mediation locations to broaden access to the mediation process. And in order to achieve these goals, we hope to accomplish the following: to have more complainants agree to mediation during the intake process, identify subject officers sooner in order to determine whether they agree to mediation, have a commitment from the police department to strongly encourage police officers to accept mediation as a resolution to complaints made by citizens, and that has been the case in the past. And then to review categories of eligible and ineligible allegations to determine whether a particular case can be scheduled for mediation. And much like we're doing with the public meetings, to designate specific days for mediation to occur at 100 Church Street or off-site locations. So far, we've been provided with statistics in order to identify which areas have the highest number of mediation-eligible cases, and we're hoping with these statistics to reach out to public housing and other community-based locations, such as courthouses, to conduct off-site mediation. Going forward, we'll work with the intake subcommittee to ensure that investigators inform complainants of the benefits of mediation, and preferably schedule a tentative mediation session from the outset. In other words, right from the initial contact if the complainant is willing and interested in mediating. And we'll also work with the outreach subcommittee to seek out off-site locations for mediation sessions. And Lisa Cohen will be preparing a mediator code of conduct to emphasize certain aspects of the mediation process, again, such as confidentiality. And we're hoping to collaborate with other agencies in order to increase the number of mediators and off-site facilities to conduct mediation sessions. So that's respectfully submitted as the subcommittee for mediation.
Thanks, Jim. I had a couple of things that I thought maybe we should discuss about mediation, because mediation, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the major changes that can move this agency forward in creating a sense of trust and a sense of effectiveness throughout the city, and certainly also with police officers. It's an opportunity to resolve cases early in certain categories and certain instances, and it ought to be availed itself as much as possible. So in that vein, there are a couple of interesting issues, it seems to me. And they've occurred to me since our last meetings and as a result of the report that I saw just prior to this meeting. And the one that comes to mind the most, that most prominently, is to what extent it's well, two of them really. To what extent it's possible to have mediations with any person who's an employee of the CCRB that are in fact effective versus independent mediators, given the fact that it may not create a sense of trust by the parties to the mediation if it's a CCRB employee that's doing the mediation. That if it's an independent mediator, it stands a much better chance of success. Certainly, I think the police officers, at least at this juncture, maybe in 3 or 4 years from now, they might think differently, but at this juncture, police officers are going to have a major sense of doubt about the credibility and integrity of the mediation process if CCRB people are the mediators. Well, I wanted to discuss that because there's an argument, obviously, for us to have in-house mediation to make it more efficient and more available. But it may not be outweighed by the fact that it won't work.
Well, I know the report does indicate training all investigators and APU attorneys, not just mediators or intake personnel, but I'm not sure that refers to training them to act as mediators. I think it refers to
we did talk
in-house
about
training.
I talked about it,
Okay.
and I don't think I'm necessarily right about that. I think I might have been wrong. I don't know. I mean, it's a debatable issue.
I would agree that if we had outside people, I think that it would probably go a lot longer way than if we used in-house people.
Well, we've always used outside mediators,
Right,
correct?
but we were thinking of expanding at least some components of it so that it would be readily available. There wouldn't be logistical problems as serious if we had inside people.
I was always of the opinion that there are very few cases that should not go to mediation.
Yeah, I agree.
Almost every case that comes in is almost mediable.
Right. Now, the second point, and I don't mean to cut off. Hi, Al.
Sorry, guys.
Good. No, please. Come on.
Hey, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Al Grant.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Could I just
Sure.
talk to that point?
Sure.
Why can't we have both? Increase the number of mediators, independent outside mediators, but as a backup, have in-house mediators, because our intent is to have mediation off-site and as many mediation date as possible. So we're going to need a battery of mediators, and if we can have both, then we may have to.
That makes a lot of sense. I see your point, because if we emphasize that we have both and we give people an option as to whether they really want to have a non-CCR, we do complete disclosure, and then they have the option. But we have the capacity when people are willing to agree to. That's a very good idea. I appreciate it, Jules. That's interesting. The second point is one that Chris Dunn made at the last meeting, which is of concern, and I think it's a significant point, and that is we don't want to lose the data that is inherent in the cases where mediation exists, where mediation occurs. Mediation to work has to be confidential, right? It has to. No, it can't be something that comes back to bite you later on because of what you say. You've got to have a freewheeling, open discourse in a mediation that isn't recorded and that's confidential in order for it to be ever to be successful. So the question then is how, and we don't want to be losing literally the very valuable information that comes in that can support studies and support patterns and support issues that are of utmost importance. And the only idea that I came up with to begin with, and I'm interested in whether there are any other ideas, is that there be a report written after every mediation session, whether successful or not, that does not disclose the names, the identities of the parties, and basically describes that we know what the alleged misconduct is going to have been, because we know that was already investigated to some degree, and there's an allegation from the original intake. But we would also then learn what the other side of the story is from the police officers, and that would be described without identifying the police officers, and it would be used for data purposes afterwards, and data purposes only. And that would be known to the parties. We wouldn't hide that from the parties, obviously. They have to agree that that's such a memo that they approved of. I mean, they could see the memo afterwards that they approved of. I don't know how to do that. In other words, I would like to figure out a way to have extensive and expansive mediations, but not lose the data that is part of the information provided in a mediation.
You know, the meeting we had with Susan Herman several months ago, it came course quite clear from Susan that everything that takes place in there and any note-taking that takes place in there, they have to be shredded. Not a shred of paper comes out of that meeting. In fact, we should not even be calling it a mediation. We should probably be calling it a discussion or something else to come up with a different term, to make it more user-friendly. But clearly, that point about taking notes and retaining notes, or doing it and redacting it, that clearly that appears to be, me not being a mediator, appears to be against all principles of mediation.
Well, I don't think Susan Herman is the final word on that, but I think
there were enough people there who knew about mediation. I'd like to hear from all.
Sure, you want to say something about that?
The good thing is that right now, even with our cases, when they come in through intake, we do have the information on the precincts, the boroughs, the officer information, and all of the information that you've been looking to highlight through the ComStat system, through our prioritizing system. So we are getting those stats, and they do come up in our reports and our mid-years. So we will have significant information about the officers that we've always had. We could ask greater questions earlier on before it gets to mediation for statistical purposes, if that would alleviate some of the concerns.
Well, but the problem, yeah, that makes sense, except that the only problem I see with that is that officers, we don't get the officers' information, and ideally you wouldn't put an officer through an interview before a mediation, or else the mediation probably is not going to work.
Right.
So Dr. Khalid, you want to say something?
I just want to add that I know we want to get the outside mediators, but there's any studies that somebody has complained about, the cops has complained, that the in-house mediators are not doing something proper?
No, I don't think that's the problem. It's just a general sense of distrust of the CCRB, which the cops have. And I don't think you need a study to know that. All you have to do is ask any
No, in the
cop.
past I'm saying if there was anything of that we are looking into the outsider.
Yeah.
I just want to know if there was anything that they did not have any trust, because it has to be agreed by the complainant and by the cops to together mediate.
Right. What I'm worried about is the police officers won't agree if they know it's a CCRB, or they won't feel that the process, if they do agree, they won't feel that the process is fair to them. And that's all. But I think Jules's response is exactly the right one, that we have both, and that we make it available to both. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. I'd love to have opinions from the public or from any other people who can think of solutions or possible approaches to this interesting question of how we can maximize the data we are ultimately trying to collect for other purposes, and at the same time emphasize mediation. Any other further comments on that before we go to the next subcommittee report? Sure.
I would just say that Lisa Cohen has had some excellent ideas with the mediation committee with regard to using outside mediation groups that are already trained. They have the trained mediators. They have office space in the different boroughs.
They're very expensive, though.
Well, they don't pay their mediators, so it's actually interesting because we do pay our mediators, but that's something that we could work on, so that if you do want to have more mediations outside in the boroughs to make it easier for officers and complainants to go to the mediations, we could try to work with some of those community groups that do mediations already to facilitate that.
I mean, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, does that also speak to the comfortability of the officers feeling that they're going to be in an unbiased situation? I think that when you talk about local groups that have volunteers to do mediation.
Maybe, but I think probably if they're really ongoing mediation groups and they work in communities, we would try and find the ones that have good reputations and have high standards.
Because I don't see how different the credibility would be if we had in-house
We have
mediators.
to assess what's the most effective way to get people to buy in. There's no question. Investigations Committee, we have a report. I know that Dan is not here. I mean, he provided a report. Was anybody designated to read that, or I can tell you what it said from my memory? Do we have a copy of that report? Because
I think she was working very closely with Al Grant, the prioritization committee.
Yeah, I
well,
was prepared.
it did duplicate, certainly.
Yeah, I was prepared to report on mine. I didn't realize Dan wasn't going to
Right.
be here.
Well, let me just say quickly what I read in Dan's email, and that is that there's a very big effort underway in his subcommittee to get information early, to work with the prioritization committee about separating cases that fall into categories or where credibility issues are extremely clear one way or the other, and have those go to the top of the pile and be focused on so they can be disposed of quickly. Cases with videos could be definitive, as opposed to some of them aren't. Some of them are ambiguous, but some of them are definitive and can be resolved quickly. And so his effort is very much about moving the investigative process forward quickly, putting teams together on certain kinds of cases to get them done quickly, and then, of course, handling the communications with the police department to get the evidence from the police precincts and other aspects of the police department much more quickly than we do now. I think we're doing a much better job in that regard, but we can still do it more effectively. I think those are the highlights.
Yeah.
Al, do you want to report on the prioritization?
Certainly. So the prioritization committee, we met on the 5th of this month, and the members included Commissioner Simonetti, Commissioner Bishop Taylor, and staff members Dennis McCormick, Jane Safuni, and John Darsh. And the initial review of the committee was to try to see if there were any sort of complaints or categories of complaints that we could put into a priority category.
Can you turn the microphone towards him?
Yeah, that would sure. Thank you.
That we could put into a priority category, keeping in mind that the message isn't that any other types of cases don't receive the utmost attention from us, but there may be certain cases that can get on a fast track. And the things that the primary category that stood out to the subcommittee was force. And if you just look at force numbers, the numbers would be too unwieldy to put all force type cases into a priority category. So we looked at numbers with respect to subcategories within force. And we identified a couple of categories, and this is just a beginning process. These aren't finite, but the initial subcategories that we think should fall into this priority category would be chokeholds, instances where there are a gun is fired, instances where there's a death or a person is shot, or there are serious injuries to a complainant or to a police officer. And we thought that from the numbers, just looking at the numbers for this year, and I don't have those in front of me, that those subcategories would give us reasonable numbers so that staff could deal with it, investigators can review it, and that the board can get to finalizing these cases in a relatively quick manner. Now, the main issue in dealing with a priority category like this is looking at the logistical issues that come with it. One of the good things is that we already have an intake unit in place, and the committee thought that utilizing the intake committee by first enhancing its intake questionnaire to be more robust so that we're capturing the descriptions from complainants with respect to what had transpired So we're getting the keywords, so we're getting a better understanding of what serious injuries are right up front, so that that information can be looked at by a designated supervisor. That supervisor will have a design list of factors to look at to then determine whether or not that case falls into, at least preliminarily, falls into a priority category. And then, and this was an idea floated by Dennis McCormick, and I thought it was a great idea, and the subcommittee agreed. We would have established these, what's the term we're using, ECTs, evidence collection teams. These would be teams of 2-person investigators that would be responsible for particular regions. So you would have one team responsible for Brooklyn, Queens, another team responsible for the Bronx, Manhattan, something to that extent. They would use the agency cars. They'll be out in the field so that when these complaints come in, they can immediately go to that area, ascertain if there's any video, begin to canvass the area, identify witnesses, try to get us information that can be uploaded into our systems very quickly, and a determination made as to whether or not, based on the evidence collected, based on the seriousness of the allegations, the nature of the allegations, is something that can be fast-tracked. That supervisor would then eyeball it, pass it on to the Deputy Executive Director in charge of investigations, who will then assign a designated supervisor and team to investigate the matter very quickly. So this is what we're sort of diving into preliminarily. I think we're off to a very good start, but obviously we want to hear from the public in terms of identifying other ways to sort of fast-track these things. And I want to point out again, and this is the importance of the investigation subcommittee, is that with this priority category, there are aspects of it that will, if they work to our design, will streamline our entire process. For example, the evidence collections team will be used in general for all the cases, and in instances where we can get to video quicker, get subpoenas out quicker, it'll be utilized in that respect.
I found Dan Gittner's report to me on my telephone, and a couple of other quick points, Al, so that you, because I do think they join very closely with the priorities issue. Dan suggests that committee is looking into the possibility of doing what he calls a ride-along, but it's not with police officers, it's for board members to sit in on additional intakes and interviews of witnesses and potential complainants, to learn the process, to understand the experience of that first process. Second, he says, I'm saying the things that I didn't say before. He says that there are cases that come to us, or that we learn about, that aren't the basis, that aren't brought to us by complainants, but we learn about them from television, for instance, where there's a report and there's a video of some arrest that appears to be that it might be misconduct, and they're looking into the issue of whether we can generate our own complaint, a complaint based on our own observations of news, essentially, of information that comes to us. That's something other commissions do a lot. I mean, the Judicial Commission, for instance, on which I sit, does that all the time. And it seems to me to be a procedure that is, the question really is a legal one, whether it's within our powers under the Charter. And if it is, that's something we can decide as a matter of policy whether we want to do. And finally, he wants to explore the issue of DA holds. And we talked about that at some level, because DA holds are a big obstacle, and we don't want to just assent to endless DA holds. In fact, it's interesting because when in talking to Joe Resnick at the police department, they have the same problem at IAB, and they are frustrated in the same way we are with sitting on cases that are on DA holds. And when we talk about some kind of DA hold for a time limit period, where if they're going to extend it, they have to justify to us that it's worthy of an extension. They can't just say we want to hold it. They have to show us where they are in the investigation and where the end of the time is going to be.
Right.
So those are the issues that he...
Right.
So,
And there was just one other point that goes to having access to information quicker. There are a number of databases, and I think Dennis has a list or is generating a list of these. There are a number of NYPD databases that there have been discussions in the past, or we may have had access to them in the past, but whatever reason, we don't have access to them now, such as like the roll call or radio runs, that if our supervisors or our investigators had access to it, it would cut down the time tremendously in terms of the review.
can you get me in the next period of time that's convenient for you a list of those databases with Dennis or with whoever needs to put that together so that I can make an attempt to get that protocol set up in the way that at least it used to be and maybe even better, I hope. Okay?
That one issue, I think, would clarify a lot of the delays in cases. If we got the database issue resolved, where we had access to the database, I got to tell you, back 18 years ago, we had access to no databases, and we had to go over to IAB with a hat in a hand to try to get information. We've come a long way, but there are still critical databases that we need, and if we had those, every committee would benefit by it.
Absolutely.
And the whole agency would benefit by it, and you'd have very few cases, in my view, going over 18 months.
You want to report on COPSTAT at this point?
Yes.
Good.
Most of what I'm going to report on really is based on us setting up computers to capture this kind of information. The first recommendation is that we create a mapping feature that would be where we would be able to quickly pull up each precinct, each of the 76 precincts, and it will be color-coded by allegation. So we all know that we deal with 4 types of allegation: the fatal, the force, the abuse of authority, the derogatory thing, and offensive language. The DO we can leave with just one color because the number of complaints are rather small. The first 2 are the big 2, the force and the abuse of authority. And with that, we would then do similarly what Al has recommended, where we break them down into subcategories, and then we designate a color code for each of those categories. What it would do, it would immediately, in a moment, you'd see the spikes in certain parts of a precinct, and you would be able to track the trends more quickly if we kept that kind of a database. That would be our first suggestion. Our second suggestion is to have our IT people run stats for each command and identify which units have particularly high numbers of cases and allegations compared to similar units in other parts of the city. For instance, if you look at one point in time, the Bronx Narcotics Unit, almost in every case, they did strip searches for all the people that got arrested. You compare that to the other narcotics units around the city, and that was not the case. When we did, and I can tell you anecdotally, when we had places where a female patrol officer was brought in off patrol to search a narcotics female prisoner. After she was arrested by narcotics division, they didn't have any female personnel. And that's done quite frequently. This young lady performed a strip search on this woman, and her response to the investigator was, "I do it in all cases." So clearly it's a serious training issue. And we did send a memo back to the department on that. But it'd be interesting to see, particularly the units like narcotics, take a look at the detectives, the warrant squad, because they generate a lot of work for us. Narcotics and warrant generate a lot of work. And see how one unit compares to the other in terms of dealing with things. And if we see these trends appearing, we obviously send it back to the PD and with an explanation that maybe they should look at the people who are doing it the right way, the supervisors who are performing it the right way. That would be our second suggestion. Our third is to have an early warning notification system. Over the Employee Management Division in the Police Department, they have such a system. And it's called the CPI, Central Personnel Index of every member of the Police Department. And there's a lot of information that's fed into that. And what it does, you can set the parameters. Let's say we decide we want to look at somebody who gets 6 civilian complaints over a 2-year period, or somebody who gets 2 substantiated complaints in a 1-year period. Whatever we decide on the parameters that are appropriate to kind of zero in on people who may be setting trends in different parts of the city. So we can set a system up that would alert us that this is happening, and boom, it would pop up in the computer and alert as it does over in the police department. We also suggested that we meet with members of the NYPD Early Intervention Unit because they have a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of factors that are important to them that I think would be equally important to us that we can kind of incorporate in our system. And once we get hits on these people, we can try to have a direct contact with the Internal Affairs Bureau because with Joe Resnick there, I think this is the appropriate unit to be dealing with that. And our last recommendation is have CDS color cases for officers with the most CCRB, which ties in with the last one. And these cases would be fast-tracked. The priority system. See, a lot of this stuff ties together. In fact, Rudy is going to be talking about the CompStat stuff.
Right.
All of this stuff really interacts with each other. You know, and a lot of this is a lot of overlapping that takes place with these committees.
Tom, just a question on that fast-tracking instances where police officers have multiple instances. My concern is not biasing the panel that's reviewing it, right? So are we going to carve in a way that the panel reviewing it will not know that these officers have, you know, this has been fast-tracked because of this background? I just want to make sure we balance that.
The only problem is you could keep that information from them, but eventually when they're doing their investigations, I think that's going to come up.
It's in the closing report.
That's true. That's going to come up because the sheet is included in their worksheets.
You wouldn't know it was fast-tracked, but you would know it was...
Yeah.
2 questions I have for you, Tony. The second category, where you say you're going to highlight certain
units,
exactly. We have the map that shows where they are and color-coded the intensity of them throughout the city. Would it make sense also, sort of like the second one, but a little different, to have the types of complaints listed and then have the units where they are problematic? In other words, do the reverse of the maps by listing the types of complaints and then describing those people where we've captured allegations of the alleged misconduct. So I just think, for suggestions.
As I say, a lot of this is going to dovetail with the CompStat stuff.
Right. But
with the regular statistical stuff that Rudy's committee is working on.
Right, but this is a very, very important tool for us, for the public to see on our website, theoretically, if it's available, which I hope it will be, and I think it has to be, actually. And, of course, the police department for training and their own CompStat purposes, if they're interested in looking, and I think they are, in looking at patterns and trends of complaints and problems. So all I'm saying is I think there's this reverse thing. It's a very narrow part of what Rudy's doing. Rudy's trying to do a CompStat on all our processes. Well, we'll hear about that in a second. Anyway, just a suggestion. The second thing is I'm interested to see how we're working with IT and whatever IT resources we need beyond what we have to make this a reality.
We definitely need a programmer.
Right. I agree.
I mean, we all know that we need the programmer. I mean, this is some heavy-duty stuff. If we are able to get all of this in computer form, it would be wonderful.
But you can imagine that we don't have to recreate the wheel here. The fact is that CompStat has this kind of mapping and has this for crime. There's no reason why we couldn't use their program or a similar one and convert it into what you're talking about.
Right. I think they either use Microsoft or to come in and write that program for them. You know, and it'd be great if we could get access to something
Jessica
like that.
Tisch runs it over there for them, and I think it's something that we could ask her about whether there's an ability to use at least the format. We're obviously not going to use the information. We're going to use the format. Rudy, you want to talk about? Sorry. Sure, please. Sorry.
Joe is a member of the
Yes, on the question of IT capacity, I know we haven't had that discussion yet, but another idea I've had for this is, I mean, I like that it's, very designed to sort of address issues in nearly like real time, but if we could design the system so that it could contain sort of historical information, or we can determine what's feasible in terms of are we storing data about trends and complaints as we put it in, or we go back in time. That may be more complicated.
That's interesting, because what you're saying is we would want to report on improvement or deterioration.
Exactly.
And I think that should be a component. That makes a lot of sense.
And I don't think it would be that difficult, because with all the stats that we keep, I think one can discern that information from the past.
The devil's in the details. The devil's in, what the maps look like. Are they accessible? Does it work easily? It's the programming and the IT stuff that is the hard part to make this stuff real for our purposes and for the public purposes. Pretty.
Okay, well, CompStat and NYPD, obviously, I think most of us know, is very involved, very detailed, and from what you just said, apparently we're going to get really deep down into all of our processes. But since our bread and butter is civilian complaints, our initial focus is going to be on the cases, how they're being investigated. Big issue, losing cases to the statute of limitations. We want to really try to bring that down to zero. And I think with more focus on investigations and with the work that the intake unit is doing, getting started on cases right away, I think that's very achievable. Now, Dennis McCormick has been conducting meetings with team supervisors to talk about cases, and a suggestion I had, again, schedules permitting, Dr. Khalid has a practice, Dan Gittner has a practice, but for one of us, again, to the extent possible, to even sit in on Dennis's CompStat sessions to talk about cases, and again, try to eliminate those SOL cases, and then work back from there to the point where these cases are being investigated really expeditiously, efficiently, and thoroughly. So that was one thing I sat with Tracy and with Dennis, and that was the initial meeting that I had. Now, my next target is for all of us on the committee to get together and talk about how we're going to go forward. As far as the internal processes, I think we need to talk about how deeply do we want to get into internal administrative things, or?
Let me just give you my 2 cents on this, and you guys think about it much more thoroughly and ultimately when you get together and work it through. I just think there ought to be some kind of a red flag system when cases slow down. I agree with you, it's primarily about cases, because that's what we have to focus on. That's what is going to lift the function of this agency beyond where it's been in the past. And I think that the internal CompStat is a way of, it goes along with investigations. It really fits with Dan Gittner's subcommittee. I'm sorry he's not here tonight. He had to go to Europe on a case, and so he'll be back. But it really fits with making sure that we see, from a computer point of view, we're alerted to information when a case is not within certain parameters at whichever stage it's at, so that the parameters have to be set, that things are getting done. Now, there may be good reasons why it's not getting done, but we ought to then focus on it. The supervisors ought to focus on what those reasons are and see whether that's justified or not, to see whether we're doing the job or not. So the internal CompStat, it seems to me, goes very closely with investigations to make sure that the integrity of the process is constantly monitored. Again, it's a computer, in some ways it's a computer issue, because we shouldn't be having people doing it. It should be popping up in our faces when we press a button to see where the cases are in the system. I mean, in theory. That's the way I kind of look at it. There may be other aspects, too, with respect to administration, with respect to other things where we set goals for certain projects, for instance, and those goals aren't being met. That would also be in there where a red flag could pop up. But there ought to be some overall internal CompStat process by which we're held accountable to our own goals and our own systems.
And just,
Dr. Khalid.
just to be clear, just on that point,
Sorry.
I realize this is about the mechanizing of the process, but we do have in place a system, I believe, and Dennis can talk to it, where I think you might have instituted it, where if a case hits a certain 6-month or 9-month period, your team sort of flags that, and there's some process there to analyze it. It's more of a human function now,
Right.
but I want to point out for the public, we do have
Every other month,
something in place
Dennis and I
there.
meet with the team managers for cases that are 12 months and over. And they have their list, they know the cases, they prepared the cases and a report for them for us. And that's what Rudy was telling us, that he wants, the committee has agreed that they want to have teams of 3 teams a month meet with us to go over those cases, to go over the sensitive cases. That ties up with your prioritization and your CompStat. Also, the cases where there's a serious case, a high priority case already being flagged by IT now. So those would be cases that Rudy and the committee would ask the teams to address and how they're proceeding with them. Our IT system already gives us a hit whenever there's no activity on a case for 30 days, and it also gives us hits when cases are within a certain period of time.
Dr. Khalid, you want to say?
Yes, I wanted to say that the SOL cases mostly, which I read, is that either the police officer is not available many times, or the DA hold is there, and that's how the SOL get passed. But if we look at that and we analyze that sometimes the police officer makes more, they cannot get in touch because they're busy or something, so it keeps on passing. And I know we have a limitation of 18 months to complete our investigation, and sometimes they like to reopen it after they, so then it becomes another issue that we have to, the SOL naturally get passed.
See, maybe I'm just in an alternative universe here, and according to Tony, I am anyway. But the fact of the matter is that I don't see 12 months as a ridiculous number for me, from my point of view. We should be talking about 45 days and 60 days and 90 days as outside parameters. The high priority cases, our complainants are going to disappear as we have a truncation rate of 50% or more because we take 12 months. Nobody's going to be interested in a case after 12 months unless they're an exceptional person, or maybe they have a lawyer pushing them because they want the discovery or some other reason. Police officers have the right not to have these things hanging over their head for that kind of time, because it affects their ability to get transfers. It affects all kinds of things within the police department. If they're innocent, they deserve to be told they're innocent in a very quick period of time. And it's just not acceptable that cases, especially significant ones, take this kind of time. So the effort has to be much more vigilant and much more vibrant and much more vital than these parameters that I'm hearing, in my view. And I'm certainly going to push everything as hard as I can to make the internal CompStat force the kind of product. Hopefully mediation is going to give us a relief. Hopefully the decline of stop and frisk cases, which have been more than 30% of our cases, is going to give us relief. I think there are hopeful signs at the end of the tunnel here to get us an ability to resolve cases quickly. But the parameters within which this agency, in my view, has been resolving cases are simply unacceptable. And we have to do better.
I think the single most important factor, if we want to achieve those goals, is we must have access to the database.
We're going to get that.
Right.
We got to have access. If we're without that, we can't do it.
If I can't get that, you'll have your way, I'll resign.
No.
So don't worry about it. That I have to get.
Yeah, Richard?
Enjoy.
Yeah,
Going back to mediation.
yeah.
In intake, mediation will be the default position, and we're going to have selected cases going to full investigation?
Well, I think the mediation committee has to decide this,
Right.
and they're looking at it closely. The idea was to limit the number of cases that would not be eligible to mediation
Right.
to the minimum amount, and then schedule mediations at intake. Now, they may have to be rescheduled. The officer may not agree. There may be reasons, but at least at the outset, the officer is going to be notified of a mediation date, and the complainant is going to be notified of a mediation date if it's an eligible case, and we're going to cut down the ineligible cases to the bare minimum of what the committee and the staff think are the ones that should not be mediated.
Well, I'm on the mediation committee, and I'm going to propose that the mediation be the default. And then the selected number of cases go to full investigation. Serious cases go to full investigation.
Right, and those would be, well, I mean, if a complainant really wants to mediate, I don't think we should deny him or her that opportunity. You know, even no matter what kind of case it is. I can't imagine in a very serious case that he or she would, but it might be the case.
For instance, in a shot fired case, gunfire case, I don't see where mediation would be appropriate, but
you know, that to me is really an interesting issue, and I think we have to explore it. I can't say that I have preconceived notions on this. I'm learning as we go along as to what the best way to proceed is with respect to what cases we would define as completely ineligible. That's an interesting question.
yeah, and we've asked Lisa and Dennis to kind of carve out those types of exceptional cases, serious cases that will automatically go to full investigation.
Right.
And the rest would be...
If you had even in one of those cases, if you had a complainant come in and beg you for mediation, then you'd ask the cop whether he or she wanted to mediate, right? I mean, you wouldn't say, you're not eligible for mediation. I don't know. This is an interesting question.
I think the mediation committee plans on helping us reconfigure our speech that we give when someone first makes the intake call, so that we can figure out how to present mediation as the primary option, and then provide the other option in terms of investigations to them. So that's something that we could address with them.
Okay.
And another discussion will be whether or not, since, in my opinion, mediation is a win-win on both sides. It speeds the time, and it enables the complainant for possibly the first time to play in a level playing field to discuss the issue with the police officers. So I'm wondering whether or not, on the part of a police officer, it should be mandated that they mediate cases, but only if they demand that it goes to full investigation. Then we have to accede to their wish.
Yeah, my read is that the police officers there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure on them, both from the union and from the police department, to mediate cases.
Yeah.
So I think that the default position for most police officers is to mediate. We'll see exceptions to that, but they really want mediation.
That's an important point. You had to get to the unions.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, we
Had dinner with
had
them last
meetings
night.
with them in the past. We sat down with them and their attorneys and told them why they should their officers should be taking mediation.
Right.
We've only had one union who's been an obstacle to us.
And recently, they rolled over for us.
Because I arranged for the president to speak to Tracy on several occasions.
Let's go to, unless there are any more comments.
Yeah, I
on
just
this.
wanted
Yes,
to comment.
please.
I think that Rudy raised a great point with the ComStat issue. I think it should really be, to your point, in terms of moving cases faster, something like CaseStat, because the
Maybe that's
philosophy
right.
of ComStat is a management operation tool.
Well, it's
I think-
crime.
Yeah, but I know, but I mean, but the philosophy behind it is, an organizational management tool. And I think that getting at where the cases are getting stuck, why they're not moving forward is, like he said, our primary objective is to, field these cases. So I think that's good that you guys started there.
I agree with that. My personal-
Have we got any further information from the department regarding the carve-out cases that they've been carving out?
Well, let me report on the whole sanctions discussions that I've been having, and I'll allude to that, but later in due course.
Okay.
Is that all right, Tony? So the outreach committee, who's the chair of the, right, sorry, Bishop.
Yes. So on the outreach committee, we have Commissioner Poomer, Commissioner Jeanette Cortez, and Dr. Khalid Muhammad, and myself. and we have staff support by Brian Connell, Carl Mace Johnson, and Jessica Long. I'm not going to go through the report because the report has things that we've done, and I want to mention that we have at this point about 30 volunteers from the agency that are made up of people from APU, investigations, the mediation department, and the case management unit that actually assist outreach in going out, because we only have 2 people in this whole agency of 160 or 70 people that are designated for outreach. And I've made this point over the years that if people,
Excuse me.
no problem, no, water's important. If people don't know what we do and what is available to them if they feel that their rights have been violated, then the agency really, sits still, basically, as it relates to serving the community. So I think that it's a point to be made that we have 2 people designated to outreach and we have 30 volunteers, which, again, takes these volunteers inevitably away from the work that they've been hired to do. As much as they do it on their own time and carve out more time, it takes extended time to do the job that they already do. So the extended time that they would invest, they're doing it now for outreach. We appreciate that, but there must be a priority on the part of this agency to ring the bell on the fact that we need more capacity in outreach. So having said that, I can tell you about all the places we've gone into with outreach sessions in the NYC developments, in the LGBT communities, in some churches, and some of the things we're going to be doing in the future. But I want to talk primarily about our discussion in our committee meeting. We talked about prioritizing moving these public meetings to neighborhoods where people live and the high frequencies of complaints come in. And some of the concerns that came out of our meeting was A, security safety for board members, 2, accessibility, 3, neutrality, and 4, intimidation. And I'll break that down. Safety. One of our board members said, because I've been pushing, let's go into NYCHA community centers, let's go into urban tracts where the people are. And I guess there was a concern on the committee's part saying that if we're going into these high crime areas, into the hood, where I grew up, that will we be safe? Because we don't know how the public will respond. Will we have officers? Will there be any designation of safety? That was one thing. And I'd like to hear some feedback on that. The second thing was accessibility. If we go to places like, and this goes into intimidation and even neutrality, if we go into a courthouse or if we go into some boroughs like this borough, the Borough Hall, which this happens to be easily accessible to all the communities here in Staten Island, and everybody knows where it is. But in other places like Queensborough Hall, which is in Forest Hills, where we probably get 2 complaints a year, and people, will they travel to have a public meeting in a place like that? Or having it in a courthouse where when people think about a courthouse, is that somewhere where I really want to go? I mean, does the public really want to go there? And then the other point was neutrality. In most of our urban tracts, the central place of gathering and transmitting and receiving information are churches. And when we brought up having these outreach meetings in churches, predominantly maybe larger churches that have maybe fellowship halls in the basement or whatever the case would be, there's a lot of pushback on that. Now, I'm sorry that, in the places where we get the most cases come from the places where these centers of the community exist, that there's an issue because it's a church. We're trying to go to where the people are. And then just to backtrack, we do have 2 meetings scheduled, one in Brooklyn and the next in the Bronx in the next couple of months. And so, we're working, feverishly to make sure that we can keep this outreach in the boroughs and people having access to it. But I'd like to get some feedback from the public and from the
Let me just say one thing in response to, and that is, I think in addition to the things you said, we're looking at getting office space in the boroughs and in areas where people can come at night and have night hours for CCRB functions, not only for the board. In other words, for interviews, for complaints, for mediations, for all the things that the CCRB does when it interacts with the public and police officers. We want to have borough presence. The second thing is, I mean, my little pet idea, which I'd like to pursue and see if there's money for, is the vans.
Vans, right.
You know, to have a van where people can see that it's CCRB and it goes to places exactly of the sort that you're talking about. And we don't hold meetings in it necessarily.
Right.
I'm not sure we could have a board meeting or a live stream, but we could have complaints taken, and we could do investigation. We could hear investigative information. We could talk to witnesses, and we could even have mediations potentially. We'll see.
Mr. Chair, I mean, that's so, I mean, we talked about the van situation, and, you know, people say, where will we get the money? But think about this. The ASPCA has a van, okay? I can talk about many other agencies that have vans, right? And here we are now, an agency that is designed to serve the public when they feel their rights have been violated. Why the police have all kinds of vans, all kinds of unit vans that are on the street. We can't have one van like you're saying? Come on.
Right. The other thing about safety is, I have no concern about safety. We live in the safest city in New York, in the country. So, you know, look, we're going to go where we go. It'll be announced. I just have no issue on safety. Maybe other people do, and we should make sure that people feel comfortable and secure, and we can get the appropriate security, whatever we need. I don't think it ought to be police officers, because that's just counterintuitive in this situation.
Right.
So, as much as we might have to rely on it in an emergency, which I can't imagine, at the outset, we should make sure that people feel safe. But I don't think it should in any way change our plans with respect to where we hold meetings at night.
What about the neutrality? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, referring to Bishop, Bishop mentioned about meetings in churches.
That's what you said.
I do feel that churches is not the only place. We have other religion in this country that they are in large number. And I think going to just hold the meeting is separation of church with the government is not the right thing to do. We have so many other places that we can get and we can have our meeting. So I think the right thing would be that, I know you're a bishop, you're looking at your viewpoint of view, but I think you should be looking at generally the city point of view, who exist other religion. Tomorrow, what we going to have a meeting in a mosque? Are we going to have a meeting in any other churches?
I agree with you 100%. We had this in our committee discussion, so I don't know why.
No, but you brought this thing, and I want to point out that the reason that we should not be going to, I know there are people that they are affected, but they are affected in any other religion, not only the church.
If I wasn't a bishop, history tells me that the centers of communities that are filing these complaints are of black and brown descent. And I'm not saying, and I also, you educated us on this in the meeting, that if we wanted to have a meeting in the mosque, we could not, right?
No, I didn't say we could not. I only said
we
that
have to take off our shoes, we have to sit on the floor.
there are religious issues that we cannot do. We have been sitting on the floor. That I can tell you.
I think this is an important distinction, Richard, if I may. There's a distinction that we have to draw here between having a board meeting and an outreach meeting.
Right. Yes.
But I'm talking about board meetings.
Yeah, I know, Bishop. And I think the compromise is understanding that we do have an obligation to find a neutral site. I think we do. Just the fact that you guys are having this conversation and it's a little elevated shows, I think, what the public would have if we were to have a board meeting there. But outreach, I want to hear them too, but I'm just saying, I think we should be mindful of that distinction, because we can have outreach meetings at churches and things, and I think that's important to be able to do it, mosque, whatever. But a board meeting, I think, is a lot different. And if you're asking me,
you're right, Al, that we do a lot of our outreach programs in various religious communities,
and that's a must, because you're right, that's where the source is. But a board meeting, it's a different animal, so to speak.
And you know, it's funny, because I was in Bishop Taylor's group initially, in his camp initially, and we had this go around about the meeting in a church in Brooklyn, and the Corporation Counsel's office, I don't think it's saying anything out of school, said it was not a wise idea, and so I came around and we're here, and that's all well and good, and quite frankly, I've sort of transformed my views on this, and I think I'm with Al on this because at this point, and mainly because, in all the same areas where you're absolutely right, our complainants are centered and their community is around a church, there also are other facilities that are neutral that are available. And the most obvious is community boards. You know, community board rooms are just like this all over the city. And there's no reason why we can't find space in a community board room that has live stream capacity and that is contiguous or very near a church or near certainly in the communities that we're talking about. The next one we're going to have is in a community board in Bed-Stuy.
I brought the points up that we talked about in committee, but I was swayed to your side and because of Dr. Khalid's comments to me about neutrality. Right. But I just wanted to bring it up because we had the discussion, and I thought that it was relevant to the meeting and to have it publicly. And so, but I totally agree. I mean, you know, I don't have any deference to a church or my deference is being in the communities where people have access and where people are impacted the most. So whether it's a community board, I don't think I would suggest going to Community Board 2 in Queens because it's really located off the beaten path, right?
There's got to be community boards in the areas where we want to be.
Right. So so as long as they're embedded in those neighborhoods, I have no deference to a religion, and I've been swayed as well. But I wanted to bring these things up.
Chair, I just wanted to point out that thanks to the ideas of the board in finding new places, we actually did a lot of research and work, and I wanted to thank Councilman Jimani Williams' office, who contacted us with a bunch of different locations in Brooklyn, the YMCA in Flatbush, the Adult Rehabilitation Center, all these different locations, and a lot of the council members have been very helpful in finding non-religious open community areas in exactly the areas you're looking for. So I think that in the future we're going to have a lot more opportunities to meet in different communities that are hardest hit with complaints regarding police-civilian interactions.
Every community board is coterminous with a police precinct.
So just
at least 76 of them.
So just so everybody knows, and I don't forget it, the next meeting is going to be on October 13th, I believe, at Brooklyn Community Board 3, Restoration Plaza, 1368 Fulton Street, first floor, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. So, I mean, this is, what?
October 8th.
October 8th? Sorry, October 8th.
13th is Columbus Day.
Oh, good. October 8th is the second Wednesday. That's right. You're right. It's October 8th. My mistake.
Also, Mr. Chairman, you had mentioned in an email that the following meeting will be on Thursday. I mean, you want the consensus of the board.
Well, yeah, let's see what happens with that. We got a ways to go on that one still. And whether I don't love the idea of the Bronx Courthouse, I would do it if we can't find anything better. But I think that it would be better to be in a community board in the Bronx.
Mr. Chair, my only question was the time, whether 6:30 was a sufficient amount of time. Not because I was late today, but my wife is very much involved in the community.
What time do you think would be?
Well, I don't know, and I hope we can get some comment on that. If a 7 o'clock time is a better start for people that are coming from work, or I don't know, but I don't know if 6:30 is a good time. That's the only concern I have.
People want to gather. So anything more in outreach before we say a couple other things?
Last thing, I've been also in touch with Councilmember Barron and Councilmember Donovan Richards in Far Rockaway, and Councilman Richards says that he's more than willing to open up doors for us to have meetings in Far Rockaway, which often has been called the lost part of our city.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, Jim, let me do some stuff on reports in a minute or two, if I may, and then we'll go to you on reports, all right?
Sure.
And so, what I hope with all these subcommittees that have reported is that we can aim for, have our own internal comp stat on the subcommittees, right? Aim for that you could tell us some deadlines that your committee is setting for itself to write protocols on implementation of these policies that you have arrived at and that you want to present to the board as policies to be adopted by the board so that we can implement them as an agency. So that this becomes a process that is not just law, so that we have a granular process that will end up in a written protocol that the board adopts that then is implemented by the agency. Does that make sense to all of you?
Yes.
Okay. So, what? We'll do that. We'll do that in a minute. You tell me when. But I wanted to say that I wanted to announce some information about reports, if that's okay at this point. Is that all right, Trace? Okay. First of all, the much-awaited mid-year report is online now. Went online today. It'll be printed up and be distributable, I think, next week as a printed form. But anybody who wants to look at it can go to the website and see the mid-year report, which is obviously board activities up through June 30th. I talked about the video report. I wanted to report on the chokehold, the progress on the chokehold report. And then we can hear, if it's okay, we can hear Jim's, anything you want to say about reports, and then we can have Tracy tell us where she is on that. You wanted to talk about anything new, or?
No, I didn't know if you wanted to talk anything. I can put that in my report.
Yeah, let's leave that for now. So, with respect to the chokehold report, we have done primarily Marco Soler and his group and people helping him have done a lot of work on this. I think we expect it to be a very important report and a very thorough report and a very profoundly probative report based on gathering of statistics and a lot of analysis that will show a lot about patterns and incidents, and also it's a report that is going to, I think, give this agency a lot of credibility, and I'll be surprised if people aren't very interested in it and that it doesn't generate a lot of discussion. I think it'll have recommendations that are profoundly important for the department, for the city, and for us. But let me just say a few things about it, because we did announce it on July 19th, and I did say that it would be done late August or early September, and it's not done yet. But it's not done yet purely as a function of our desire to have it issued when it is of the highest quality, when it has been vetted in the most rigorous way so that the mistakes are minimized and the mischaracterizations are minimized. There'll inevitably be some. It's going to be well over 100 pages long. And it's going to be very thorough and very carefully done. So we want to do it right, and we're going to issue it hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and I certainly expect that, and we're driving hard to get it done. Let me just say preliminarily some important findings that have emerged that I can say for the public purposes and to report to the board. It turns out that it's pretty clear that what's going to be documented in this report is that there is a significant difference in the CCRB complaint histories of officers who had chokehold allegations compared to officers who had no chokehold allegations. So that's going to be, a very serious finding, I believe, and a potential red flag for training purposes and for NYPD purposes. We're going to do regression analysis with respect to those officers, so we look at which variables are associated with chokehold conduct in relation to other force complaints and other types of CCRB history. We want to see whether this analysis is going to determine whether chokehold allegations are also predictive of future misconduct, or if an officer's complaint history is predictive of a potential chokehold, both ways the case. And we're looking at whether factors in officers' complaint histories can be used, obviously, to identify problem-prone officers. Second, there are extraordinary differences among the city's precincts in the numbers of chokehold allegations that arise from them. and we found a strong correlation between the number of chokehold incidents per precinct and the number of force complaints. That seems fairly obvious, but it is still very important to document. And in other words, the more force complaints per precinct, the greater number of chokehold allegations, which are going to be documented in this report. Third, when I accepted the position, I said I wanted to do a lot and try and affect some change in this agency, as everybody knows. One of the ways we're going to do that is an appraisal of CCRB complaint handling methodologies. We're doing that now, but the chokehold report is also going to be an audit of the way that CCRB handled 5 years of allegations, that some of which, 1,100 of which, were chokehold allegations, but it turns out probably that many more of which should have been or likely could have been chokehold allegations. And so we're going to do our own audit of how the CCRB handled allegations that could have or should have been in a category of chokehold. And the audit is yielding troubling information. And one thing in particular is that in the agency's investigative teams, there was a lack of uniformity in the way that allegations were categorized as chokeholds or not categorized as chokeholds. And that the response to narratives of the civilians complaining that they were choked or put in a chokehold was very different within this agency depending on the teams that investigated. And that is not acceptable and has to be changed. And we're working to define this problem more exactly and precisely. At this point, I think that's all I should say. I think that you can see that this is a major and significant report, and that when it comes out, we're going to have a public debate about it, certainly by the time of the next meeting. And everybody here and everybody else who wants to will be able to go online and digest it, comment on it, criticize it, and tell us comments about the chokehold report, which I think will be frequent and substantive.
Will the report also include an analysis of how the NYPD has dealt with cases that were substantiated as chokehold allegations?
Absolutely. It will indeed. It's going to. I don't think. Well, there may be some things that it doesn't deal with, but I can't think of them. It's a pretty amazing report so far, and the key is now to create the focus that it should have so that it serves the purpose of training and organizing us to prevent this kind of activity from ever happening in the future.
Mr. Chairman, I read 4 cases today at the intake, and 4 of them were chokehold complaints, and 4 of them were uncooperative. The complaint was uncooperative. How do we handle that as far as they were complained that chokehold was used, and there were 4 cases I read in detail, but at the end of the day, the complainant was not cooperative.
Well, that's an interesting question for the investigation subcommittee, it seems to me, and the priorities committee, and then the issue that we raised earlier as to whether when a complainant is uncooperative, we can pursue a case because we think it's important enough on our own. It certainly will go into a pattern. It certainly will go into COPSTAT. It certainly will go into pattern analysis. So it's not going to be lost that just because a police officer is alleged to have inflicted a chokehold and the complainant is uncooperative, maybe there won't be a there won't be a substantiated complaint, but it's not going to be lost in the future. I'm afraid in the past it has been lost in our analysis, and that's part of what I think we have to do to improve our functioning when it comes to chokehold allegations.
Dr. Cleve, on that point, there have been a couple of cases, and I've seen them in the cases I review as well. What we're doing is we're asking the teams to go back and look and see if there's any independent witnesses, if there's any independent evidence, audio, video, if there's NYPD cameras or SOAR cameras in that location that might give us independent evidence to determine whether that happened, even though the victim or the complainant is no longer.
Although CCRB investigators have sent them letters, they have tried to get in touch with them and everything, again, they were uncooperative, so.
Right. Before the board decides, we're going to try to get you every piece of evidence we can that would possibly give you reason to think that this either did or did not happen based upon the preponderance standard. So
I don't know whether we'll ultimately be able to go beyond taking action in cases where there are complainants, but I certainly am going to, I for one, and I hope the board as a whole, is anxious to exhaust the possibilities of our authority to do so in appropriate cases.
Mr. Chair, one thing that I will ask, and I have every confidence that you've already going to build this in, but I think it's important for us just to put that out there, that for the chokehold report that you build in your time frame, an opportunity for the board to be able to review
It's
it
already,
and vet it.
that's definitely built in. The board will get it at the same, when it's when the typos are out of
Right.
it.
No, because there were things that you raised today
Right.
that were very concerning to me,
Of
and
course.
this is the first time I'm hearing it.
Right.
And this is the thing that I'm concerned about. As a board member with responsibilities for operations of the CCRB, not knowing of these things before they're announced, that's a real concern to me, Richard. So I just want to make sure we
Right.
build it in
There's no
so that we
question
have an
that
opportunity.
the problem, the reason that it hasn't been distributed is because it's not in a form to distribute.
I appreciate that.
And as soon as it is, you're going to have it. That you can be sure of.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to what's being talked about tonight, what I tried to do was take some things out, because it's more delayed than I had hoped it would be, to make sure that people understood how rigorous the process is that's going into this production is, and so that it's not just saying, "Oh, we're doing a great job, we're moving forward." I want people to understand that this is a substantive, very serious undertaking, and that we're making progress, and we've even made certain findings that are tentative, and they may be. The board may look at it and say, "No, those findings are not legitimate," but. That's why we're going to do it in draft, and we're going to have comments, and we're going to have comments from the police department, we're going to have comments from the mayor's office prior to it being made public, and we're going to vet it. We're going to vet it in every rigorous way we can. Great. Jim, is there anything else on public reports that you want to talk about?
Well, I was planning on saying that the semi-annual report was being reviewed by the committee and was going to be on the website shortly, because I wasn't aware that it had been approved.
Well, I'm sorry, that should have been communicated. I don't know how that happened. I really felt terrible about the fact that it hasn't been put out before this meeting.
I understand that. It was sent to us within the past 48 hours, I think.
I thought we always have an opportunity to get a draft copy to look at before.
The draft was sent out, but it was just sent out within the past 48 hours.
At midnight last night.
we haven't published it. What we did was we put out a draft for the review of the board and a review. It's on the website with the idea of getting public comment before we do a finalized version that would then be published.
Has been sent to the
It has not been printed, no. Right?
The validation of the stats?
It has been, the police department was notified of its placement on the web.
I mean, we've done this historically just to make sure the stats are right.
Right. Well, we've had a big internal vetting of the stats, and if the stats are wrong, it's a draft report that's on the web, which will then be corrected. There's nothing terribly controversial in the report. Other people can make points about it, but I think if the stats are wrong, we'll get those fixed.
And Jim, the vignettes have been left out?
Well, as I recall, there's no vignettes in this semi-annual, and I don't think there were any in the last annual report. And this is something that they seem to have dropped off the template, if you want to call it a template, for these reports without really. The committee hasn't really discussed it, and it might be something that we should have discussed with the staff. But I found them to be useful in the sense that they don't identify parties or locations, but they're based on actual complaints, and they illustrate the various typical, if you want to say typical complaints and the various outcomes that arise. And I think they're instructive, so I think we should reinstate them, or at least the committee will should discuss, or the board should discuss, whether we want to put those back in.
I agree.
But that's for future, future reports, obviously. We're not going to do them for the semi-annual, because the semi-annual has been, it's, at this point, it is overdue, so. And aside from that, I think the chair referred to the report on recording, video recording, and allegations that arise as a result of either parties or complainants or witnesses videotaping or otherwise recording encounters with the police, and how those generate complaints and so on. But that report was issued to the committee. I think it might have been circulated to the full board, but obviously that's going to be expanded, and we have no problem with that. And aside from that, I think one of the areas that we might look at, I think, are entry and search of premises complaints where an iCard was the basis for the initial contact. Those seem to be problematic in that we seem to see a lot of cases that come out of those. And then obviously you have complaints from arrest warrant cases and search warrant cases, but I think the iCard is one that we could start with. So aside from that, I think...
I wanted to propose to the committee that we think about a report going forward, and I don't have a schedule for it, on the issue of officers either under oath or otherwise not telling the truth in documents. That is a very big issue on the police discipline hierarchy, and it seems to me we have a lot of evidence of that the police department never gets the benefit of and the public never gets the benefit of, and that it's a potentially productive report to find out under what circumstances and why, perhaps, and what the conditions are and what's related to what might seem obvious to some, but I don't think is going to reveal itself as obvious if one really takes a hard look, a neutral look, an objective look at the circumstances when it appears that police officers aren't telling the truth.
Well, I think that's obviously an area that we do have other misconduct noted for making false statement under oath to CCRB investigator. I think those cases are very small in number. So if you're going to expand to areas where it appears that the officer may be less than truthful, I mean, that would open a whole new category.
Well,
but that is certainly, that's part of what investigators do, assess credibility, and it's certainly an area that could be looked at.
Nothing else on the report?
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just report quickly on ongoing meetings with the police department in an effort to what I think both the police department and Dan Gittner and Roger Smith and I are calling an effort to rationalize the disciplinary process. We have an agreement that there will be no discussion of what goes on until we come up with a product. I don't want to violate that agreement, but I can say that this is very hopeful, that they are thirsty for change of the current system, which they view, as do we, in terms of the way that the agencies relate to one another, as broken is too strong a word, but it's pretty close. And they very much want to rationalize also the agreement about sanctions and the agreement about process. That is, our process interacting with their process. As we all know, the police commissioner has the final authority over discipline. That's not going to change. It shouldn't change, in my view, because the authority has to lie where the accountability is. I don't want the police commissioner saying, oh, the CCRB didn't do anything about that officer whenever something happens. So, in my view, given the fact that the absolute reality is that the police commissioner has the ultimate authority and responsibility for and accountability for discipline, we have to mesh with that process in a way that serves effectively get public trust over the process of making complaints and having them investigated and sent to the police department with the right kinds of investigative analysis and factual findings and the right kinds of recommendations for sanctions. And they're meaningless if we don't get traction with the police department on both counts. And so that's the process we're engaged in. It's actually, I think, remarkably hopeful that it's going to improve things, but it's yet to be determined the outcome. There are a number of meetings going forward, and all we can do is work hard to make it work.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the efforts that you are making in the direction that we're heading, and this is fantastic that we're having these discussions with PD. But, and maybe it's just me, if the other board members were aware of it and I was out of the loop, then fine. But this is the first time I'm hearing about this meeting of sanctions discussion that you're having with NYPD, with another board member, Roger from the staff. I've never heard of this, and then you're talking about there's no discussion on any agreements. These are important aspects of what we do, Richard, and the board needs to be a part of this, because ultimately, when this decision is rendered, it is what the CCRB did. And this is the first I'm hearing about it. And look, I don't want to be a hindrance to anyone, but I have an obligation here. When I was designated to be a member of this board, I have an obligation to know these things. And if I'm speaking out of line, you guys need to check me right now, and I'll shut my mouth.
Al, before you
I need to know these
I
things.
brought up the exact same issue.
Al,
You should know.
With all respect, Richard.
I
That's all
understand
I'm
your
saying.
point. I understand your point, and let me respond to you. It was brought up at the last meeting. I announced that I was having this ongoing process to look at sanctions. It was discussed at length. You can look at the transcript.
But I remember us discussing that either we would come up with a decision, either you or someone else would be involved in that process, a subcommittee. We discussed that we would have a discussion about who would attend this process. I remember having that discussion.
Well,
and that was outside of the actual board meeting. We had that discussion.
Well,
and quite frankly, it's to me it's common sense that if you're having a meeting with the PD on sanctions, things of that nature, that you have some diversity on that subcommittee. Right? Was there anyone from PD? Were any of you guys there? Were any of you guys aware of this meeting?
I tried to get invited.
Well, I mean,
I didn't get invited.
I'm just saying for perspective. Richard, I understand you are moving ahead and it's fantastic, but we've got an obligation here to know what's going on.
And I think
Wait, just one comment, please.
Sure.
18 years that we've met with various police commissioners at different times. Every time we met with a police commissioner or a police representative, we came back here and we divulged exactly what took place at those meetings, okay? And what progress we were making in terms of getting access to databases and how they were cooperating with us. We talked about the Duke cases, okay? That's another thing. Yeah, we got 3 people. We sit as a panel of 3. We're pretty intelligent people. I mean, I guess we're average intelligence at least. We've been around the block a few times. And I must tell you, the panels that I sit on, the current panel that I sit on, we did 2 panels this week. And we devote a lot of time to have discussion because we very rarely agree whether it's on the classification of the allegation or the penalty that we should met out. We have a long discussion about that. A lot goes into it. First of all, I resent the fact that we have to put it in writing why we're voting that way.
He resents.
Okay? I don't want to put anything in writing why we're voting that way. That's number one. Secondly, 3 people, we decide to substantiate and prefer charges. And the next thing we know, we get the report back, the case is doomed. I mean, that happens on many occasions. Many occasions. Maybe not with the current, it happens on many occasions. And it's frustrating, let me tell you. After spending all this time, doing all this work, having these discussions, and I must tell you, the panel, I happen to sit on the panel with Al and with Dan, and we take this stuff very serious. You know, and that's my feeling about it.
I'm just being asked to be kept in the loop, that's all.
I understand your point, Al.
Thanks, Rick.
let's, we announced the next meeting. Trace, are you want to give the report that's planned for you? Good.
Great.
Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And I know it's warm in here, so bear with me. I'll try to keep this short. In August of this year, the agency received 408 complaints within its jurisdiction. This was 88 fewer complaints than was received in the same period of 2013, when the CCRB received 496 complaints. The total intake for the month of August of 2014 was 1,129 cases. In August, the board closed 536 cases, which is 3,444 cases from year to date. In the first 8 months of this year, the board has closed 1,291 full investigations, which includes 196 substantiated complaints. And our year-to-date substantiation rate is 15.2%, which is consistent with prior years. In August, civilians and officers mediated 20 cases. Year-to-date, the CCRB has mediated 117 cases. And in August, the CCRB closed 22 cases as mediation attempted, and for the 8 months of this year, the board has closed 123 cases as mediation attempted. The numbers for July 2014 have been adjusted. We initially reported that we've received 442 complaints, and we now report that we've received 430. The numbers for the year in total have also been adjusted to reflect that the total number of complaints received from January through July of 2014 was 3,131 and not 3,145 as originally reported. The reason for that, again, is that during the course of an investigation, it can be determined that some of the cases actually fall outside of the jurisdiction of the agency, and so they are referred out, and the numbers are continually adjusted. From January through August of 2014, the agency received 3,539 complaints, which is 19 fewer complaints than had been received in the same period of 2013, when the agency received 3,558 complaints. Year-to-date, we've had a drop in complaints of 0.5%. The detailed monthly statistical report continues to show two forms of reporting. We've been talking about the idea of a truncation rate versus a case resolution rate. So if you look at page 8 versus page 9 of your report, you will see the two different stats. And again, that reflects the difference between the complaint withdrawals being included in truncation and not included within the case resolution. So from January through August of this year, the amended truncation rate, excluding cases closed as complaint withdrawn, is 46%. In the same period for 2013, the truncation rate was 57%. And the case resolution rate for the same period from January through August of 2014, the case resolution rate was 44.5%. And in the same period for 2013, the case resolution rate was 34%. At the end of August, the agency's docket was 2,473 cases. This is a 5% decrease over the month of July, when we were at 2,605 cases. Measured by the date of the CCRB received the complaint, 95% of our complaints of our open investigations stem from complaints filed in the last year, and 66% of our cases were filed in the last 4 months. Of the 2,473 open cases, 495 are awaiting panel review. That's 20% of our docket. 1,784 are being investigated. That's 72% of the docket. And 194 cases were in the mediation program, which is 8% of our docket. By date of incident, 9 cases in the CCRB's open docket are 18 months or older. This is a 0.4% total of our open docket. And it's 3 fewer cases than in July of 2014, when we had 12 cases. The breakdown of August 2014 statute of limitations expiration cases is as follows. None of the cases are currently pending board review. All 9 cases are open investigations for which the statute of limitations crime exception applies in 6. Out of the 9 cases, 3 cases are on DA hold, 5 cases were filed months after the date of incident, and 1 case was reopened months after it was originally closed. In July of 2014, the police department closed 12 substantiated cases involving 14 officers. Of the 14 officers, 1 officer pled guilty and forfeited 52 days. 8 officers received instructions, and the department declined to prosecute cases against 5 officers. And before you asked me what happened with that case where they forfeited 52 days, that case involved other non-FATO, non-CCRB cases. So they were subsumed together. In July, the department's disciplinary action rate was 64% and 60% year-to-date. Our year-to-date ratio where the police department has declined to prosecute cases is 27%. In August of 2014, the board substantiated 22 cases with a recommendation of charges and specifications. These cases were forwarded to the APU, our Administrative Prosecution Unit, and at the end of August, the open docket of APU involved 338 officers. Of the cases, dispositions were modified by the police commissioner for 2 officers and were awaiting final disposition. 25 pleas were entered and are awaiting approval by the police commissioner. In 9 cases involving 12 officers, the trial verdict was rendered and is awaiting approval by the police commissioner. 19 trials involved 29 officers and were completed but are awaiting verdicts. 9 trials, including 13 officers, were commenced but haven't been completed yet. 48 trials involving 77 officers have been scheduled. 30 cases involving 42 officers have been calendared for court appearances. 40 cases involving 61 officers are awaiting their initial court appearance after charges have been served. In 19 cases involving 33 officers, charges have been filed and are awaiting service. And 27 cases involving 44 officers are awaiting filing of charges. We are reporting final dispositions in APU cases against 38 officers. With regard to 14 of these officers, the police commissioner dismissed the charges that formed the basis for the plea agreement between the APU and the officer. For 2 of the 14 officers, the police commissioner disapproved the plea, dismissed the APU charges, and imposed no discipline. For 12 of the 14 officers, he dismissed the APU charges and imposed discipline in lieu of charges as follows. 7 officers received a Schedule B command discipline. 3 officers will receive formalized training at the academy, and 2 will receive instructions at the command. The police commissioner retained jurisdiction under paragraph 2 of the MOU on cases involving 13 officers. He notified the CCRB that he did not intend to impose any discipline against 6 of the 13 officers. The other 7 officers whose cases were retained will be disciplined as follows. 5 will receive formalized training at the academy, and 2 will receive instructions at their command. The statute of limitations expired against 4 officers before their cases were assigned to APU. Charges were not filed against 1 because he died before his case was sent to APU, and against 2 others because they retired before charges could be served. Charges against 1 officer were dismissed by the APU. In terms of some updates, we are working on a complaint tracking system for the public online. The Your Case system is something that will allow members of the public to see the status of the case pending in, either in mediation, investigations, APU, and it will give not specific information about the complainant or the officer, but it will give the details of where the case, the status of the case, whether it's being investigated, whether the board is reviewing it, and it will be open to the public. We are also working on a 311 app. The idea being that New York City has a number of agencies that have a 311 app, and we are hoping that DO-IT will be able to get that up quickly so that we can have complainants file complaints online and also potentially in the future be able to upload video. I'm happy to say that a number of our staff, including one of our board members, has been attending the Columbia Law School mediation program. It's a 2-week program, a very intensive program given by one of the former board members, Carol Liebman, who is a professor at Columbia Law, and she offers us each year the opportunity to attend the class. And I've been going, and I think it's an excellent experience. I'm sure
It's been fantastic.
Mr. Puma would say the same. The APU quarterly report, the second quarterly report, has been delivered to the police commissioner. I believe it is up on the website. The board has gotten a copy of it, and it gives the statistics with regard to APU's docket and what's occurred during this past time. Other than that, do you have any questions?
Okay, so are we up to the point where we can have public comment?
I believe old business is, we've done
We've
old
sort of gone over old business on that.
and new business, everyone's.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
could we just talk a little bit about the open meetings law, because we had subcommittee meetings that we had scheduled but we canceled because of just a little bit of confusion.
Let me say that we've had advice that contradicts from different one contradicts the next. We're trying to get a definitive ruling on subcommittee activities. There is some case law that says they should be open and or recorded, and there is other authority that says they need not be. And we are going to get a definitive ruling on that before we go forward with subcommittee meetings. And so I do think that we will, we're going to operate under the best advice we can get from both internally from our lawyers and from court counsel. That's, so it's a non-answer.
There's an answer nonetheless.
Right. Are we okay with starting with public comment?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the first person who wants to speak is Jose LaSalle.
Yes.
You want to go to the microphone?
You don't mind if I stand here better, I'd rather be closer to the...
I prefer it if you stand up there. We put it there. You can pull it forward if you want. I mean, that's, I don't care.
I really want to talk to y'all. Ain't nobody really in public here, so...
Mr. LaSalle, we just
My concern is to
we
y'all.
have someone typing it, so we just want to make sure she can hear everything you're saying. That's the only thing.
Well, she here. I'll be loud enough. One of the things that I'm going to touch upon is dealing with. I know this is the civilian complaint review board, but when y'all talk about people going through a hassle because of y'all calling them down, y'all really don't talk much about civilians. I heard y'all mention about police going through so much problems to be part of this mediation or be, saying, to be part of the investigation, but I ain't hear nothing about civilians and what they have to go through to be able to be part of this, and the struggle and the obstacles that they are being placed through. Because in reality, this what I thought I was, was about more the civilians that worry about how police feel or how much hassle they got to go through. Because in reality, the reason y'all exist is because of civilians, and y'all should be more focused on that, and they should be the priority, not the NYPD. So that's one reason why many people, like myself, look at y'all like, toothless, and really, since y'all been in existence, have not really accomplished much to tone down police brutality, police harassment, the dehumanizing that's taking place every single day, the families that's being left traumatized, the assaults, the criminalization of people, and also the murder of people. Y'all have done nothing. I mean, it's just been rising. Crime been going down, police brutality been going up. So y'all need to recheck yourself on that. That's one, dealing with that. Now, number two is dealing with Bishop Taylor talking about churches and also Muhammad Khalid talking about mosques or religious places. People in the community no longer have faith in religious churches, no longer have faith in anything, especially that deals with bishops and deals with clergymen or things of that nature. So you're definitely not going to get a show up of people there, because, including myself, we feel like we've been sold out by a lot of these churches. And in reality, it has happened. And I'm speaking on behalf of the people in the communities, because that's where I live and that's where I'm at every single day. And I'm still living in these communities. And I believe that these meetings should always be held in a space where there is no type of obstacle dealing with religion, no type of obstacle dealing with courts, no type of obstacle dealing with police officers present, somewhere where people could feel comfortable to go and express themselves without feeling like they're going to be retaliated in some way, or they're going to be looked down upon by their clergy leaders from there, who are actually supporting more the police station, the NYPD, because I go to every meeting, basically, that the priests and councils put together. And I listen, and I'm there, expressing my concern about police brutality, and everybody there is one-sided. So I feel that these meetings should never be held in any religious or any place like this where people has to go through so much hassle to get in. Us getting in downstairs, I mean, we was being, the security was on us like we was bringing in some type of bombs or something in here. So we shouldn't be feeling that type of pressure to come here and let y'all know what's going on in our community. The third thing I want to talk about is outreach. You spoke about outreach. You spoke about outreach. You spoke about outreach, I think. One of you, anyway. Spoke about outreach. That's very important. But the problem that we do outreach in communities, we put a table out there. We have CCRB form that has the IAB, all the things on top, wherever you want to send it to. And we stand out there, and a lot of people come to us and say, why am I going to waste my time with that? Why am I going to sign this up to go and see these people, go through this mediation if I want to, which is mediation. A lot of people believe is nothing but a way to save the police officer from having some kind of case following him around. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable about your existence. A lot of people believe that y'all shouldn't even exist because you're really not doing nothing to help the problem that people of color facing every single day in the community of color. I mean, no one believes you're doing anything. So dealing with the outreach, you have to come to the communities who are really affected. Y'all call it high crime areas. We call it saying community. They're franchise or forgotten community that police officers say these are the community we could go in there and do what we want to these people because ain't nobody gonna say nothing about it. And we have a police commissioner who actually don't give two crap about what their officers do. And it proves it by 25% of your recommendation, he took those things and threw them out the door. He kicked them out the door. He said to every single one of y'all that, you know, in other words, if I don't accept it, if I don't look at it, if you don't bring it to me to the point where the person itself is here with a broken leg or with a piece of his arm hanging or with a stamp on his head saying police just hit me or NYPD stamp on the head, then don't bring these cases to me. So what does that show us? That shows that y'all don't have no muscle. That shows that it is reality what y'all putting here. For me, it's a puppet show because it is not doing anything to help the community. And I want to touch on two more things. All right, so now that was outreach. Number 4, we was talking about, number 4, we was talking about your private meetings and so-called Tosano and Alfonso having no idea that these private meetings are taking place. I mean, I'm not part of the board and I know these meetings are taking place. I mean, these are things that are being put out through the news media. Unless you live in a recluse cave somewhere and you only come out for this, I mean, there's no way that you could not know about this. So, you know, I don't believe, to be honest, I don't believe what you're saying that, oh, you're doing this and we're not part of it. That's a whole bunch of hogwash for me because I believe that every one of y'all know exactly what's going on here and every one of y'all is part of this. Just like Bill Bratton is also part of this. You know? So I just want, and then the last thing I want to touch upon, which I feel is very important, is right now dealing with the statistics. Right? It's funny that you talk about the chokehold and the close to 1,000 chokehold that y'all had no choice but to bring out after Everett Garner was murdered right here on Bay Street, was murdered by a police officer from the 120th precinct, Daniel Pantaleo. That is the only reason that y'all decided to bring all the suddenly there's all these complaints about chokehold. So all of a sudden now you come here to us. Well, I'm not saying the community because majority of these people ain't even part of the community, but you come here to some of us who are part of the community to tell us that you have no report on it and that you still need more time. You know how long these things been sitting on your desk, especially you've been here 18 years, so you shouldn't even have an excuse. And in 18 years, I don't see what changes you've seen because I haven't seen any. So, it's to be honest, I created a car wash patrol unit. I have hundreds of documentation of police violating our rights as we document police, violating people's right in my community. I mean, I have hundreds of these videos in existence, you know. Every police officer within this precinct know who I am, know who CPU Union are because we are up in their houses. We're making sure that we bring it into their house. We're making sure that we let them know that if this board here, CCRB, or the IAB, or the new Inspector General, the NYPD Inspector General, they're not going to make them responsible, then we're going to do our part. We're going to embarrass them. We're going to make sure that everybody see what kinds of ignorant people are in our community patrolling and serving. They are servants to me. In reality, I am their employers, and they're my employees. So I have the right to watch my employee. And if they're out of the hand, I have the right to discipline my employee. And we're doing that by making sure that we embarrass them through YouTube, to social media, which we have a very large network. And the reason I'm saying that is because we need to take this fight even to y'all. We need to let y'all know and let the people out there know All right? What is going on here? And let them know and show our statistic that they talk about all this they have done, but let me show you what is still happening in the community of color. Let me show you how people are still suffering every single day. You know, people get out the train station and get harassed. People in front of their building getting harassed. Old ladies getting harassed in front of their own building. You can't even walk to the store without being harassed. This is the type of world I live in, not this world that y'all creating. So I want y'all to look deep into yourself. You know what I'm saying? In reality, a lot of this bullcrap that I feel that y'all over here spitting out to us, y'all need to start changing, because there's going to be brothers like me or sisters that's going to come into these community meetings, and not only that, we're going to take this out there and let them see the true color that lies within each and every one of y'all. Peace.
Thank you. Mr. Trujillo, I can't read the first name. I'm sorry. Is Miss or Ms. Trujillo or Miss? Mr.
Mr.
Thank you. Is it
Josmar.
Josmar. Thank you.
So I'm going to assume you didn't have a response from Jose and nobody on the board. But so I just want to start off by saying, I mean, everyone in this room knows we're here in Staten Island specifically because of what happened to Eric Garner. And to all of Jose's points about, you know, the fact that I'm hearing suggestions on the board that we need to somehow take the bias out by concealing the history of an officer during an investigation, or that somehow we need to make the process easier on police officers. Right to his point, I think it's a slap in the face to this community. It's a slap in the face to the next community you'll go to we're in the Bronx. Oh my God, the complaints there you'll find are even, you know, probably even worse than Staten Island. But, you know, we were at the meeting before last, and during the public comment section, members of the public talked to every member on this board about a sense of urgency, and there is still no urgency left. I mean, there's no urgency coming from this meeting. There's no urgency coming from any of the report, anything that I'm seeing. And you can have night meetings. You can go to different locations. You can get a van, 2 vans, 3 vans. But if you don't change your mentality, nothing is going to change with how you guys are affecting NYPD. And the fact that today, Mr. Emery, that you said that you still believe, that you think that the commissioner should still have ultimate authority. Like if it were up to you, as toothless as this organization has been, as this agency has been, you would, even if you had the choice, you would still want the commissioner to have authority. I mean, I'm surprised that Commissioner Brad doesn't throw 100% of the recommendations out of the door, because we think the agency is a joke, but he must think it's an even bigger joke. But let me get to the good part, because there was a lot of good stuff. I mean, I know we're talking about reforming the agency and kind of a fresh start, right? The new administration's talking about doing it right this time, you know. And I'm sure Commissioner Simonetti believes you, you know, and that's why he's concerned. But I don't believe you, and that's why I'm concerned. And I will speak, with all due respect, I'm going to speak directly to you, Chairman, because one of the things we're looking for, I think, in our communities is, from our oversight bodies, is independence. And you've spoken already to the fact that you have a personal relationship with Commissioner Bradley. I know that I read that your son's godfather is John Miller, who is Bratton's counterterrorism now. And I know that you you donated or raised campaign funds for Mayor de Blasio. So you seem to have some very specific personal ties to not only 1PP, but the City Hall. And that to me says that this agency, which is, I'm guessing it's most or not maybe all of these members are from the Bloomberg era, but even our new chairman who's coming in and saying all the right things, that there is not enough independence here. Now, I don't know what the solution is. I know you're here and everyone wants to give you a fresh start, but I don't have faith as a public member, and you can see here that there's not that many public, members of the public here. We still don't have faith in you. And if you're not even willing to take the authority from Commissioner Bratton, if you're not willing to speak truth to power for our community, if you're going to err on the side of being friendly to the officers, then I think Mr. Simonetti should be completely confident in you, because I'm not confident. And I think that's where the problem lies.
Let me just say one thing in response to what I consider to be very articulate comments that you're making. this agency has prescribed powers under the charter, under the city charter. The power is to investigate civilian complaints and make recommendations. It has no power to discipline officers. The process is a lot of power. The fact of the matter is when officers have to come in and justify themselves, that's in fact a lot of power in some sense, and I think we use that power quite well. We bring officers in on virtually every case. But you're right, we do not have the right to discipline them. And when I talk about the divergence between the authority to discipline and the responsibility for the department, that's really my point. I don't think this agency or any agency other than the DAs or ultimately the mayor who can fire the police commissioner has the power to discipline. There's no administrative agency that I can think of. There's no agency that I can think of that doesn't have the administrative power over discipline for itself. That's not to say that there isn't other forms of response that's appropriate if they violate the law and if various things, and I'm not saying that every case where a police officer violates the law is prosecuted, but that's not something that we're responsible for. That's something the legal system has to undertake. This is a process that's between the police department and the public to adjudicate investigations only, not ultimate discipline. And we don't have any power to go beyond that. I've been a civil rights lawyer. I've handled police abuse cases for 40 years, more. And the only reason I took this position is because I thought, and I still think, and I'm still optimistic, that putting my money where my mouth is, which is not getting paid to spend 160 or 70 hours last month and probably this month working on this board, has the potential to turn around an agency that hasn't had any public support or any public confidence, with good reason in my view, into one that does. And all I can do is try and increase the integrity of our investigations and the integrity of our results. And if the police commissioner doesn't respect them at that point, then he has a problem, and he's going to have a problem if he doesn't respect those outcomes once we are improved to the point where we have the integrity and the high ground to make those recommendations. And that's going to be all open. The whole point here is that this is transparent. You're going to be able to come to every meeting. You're going to hear debates like you never heard before, just like you heard tonight. There's not agreement on this board. Everybody disagrees with everybody else. They disagree with me. That's healthy. That's good. I want that. So what we're going to do is make it transparent. It's going to be a process. And if in 2 years we can't have, I'm not going to say you're going to be confident in 2 years. I'm not going to say you're going to think we did a good job even. I'm going to say, though, that we will be incrementally or substantially better than we are now with the integrity of our processes, with the outcomes of our investigations, and with the recommendations, which is all we have the power to do, to the police department for discipline.
I'm going to just finish because I know there's a lot of people. I'll just say that then your op-ed in the Daily News today shouldn't have said how we're going to police the police. It should have said how we're going to try to police the police.
I did. I said I'm going to endeavor, I'm going to try to do the things.
It's very different. Your op-ed was very different today because you're talking about we're going to police the police, and everything that you're saying
you
here,
know what?
You're already giving yourself a lot.
You actually have a good point. I didn't write the headline. I wouldn't have written that headline. That was the Daily News that wrote it. They tried to get you to read it, see? Chris Dunn from the NYCLU.
I really don't want to stand behind
Yes, it's just, consider it the Second Circuit on bank.
It's not the Second Circuit.
All right.
On bank or
Well,
All right. I always like to start with some good news. So it's terrific you're out in the community. You can do much better than that, but it's great that you're out. And the 18-plus month report in this month's census report looks much, much better. Looks like the statute of limitations problem is greatly improved. Good for you. Okay, let's turn to the things that aren't so good. And I don't want to go through a lot of details here, but there are two major things that you have talked about, Richard and others, that I think are alarming. The first is this mediation business. And I'm going to say to you, when I hear the board talking about mediation the way you are, I just have this image of this big hole getting dug next to 100 Church Street and all your complaints getting dumped into it. It is not acceptable to take the position that what this agency is about is mediating cases. Cops will love that. Mediation is the best thing in the world for them. They come in, they sit down, they have a meeting, they go home. There's no discipline, there's nothing. And Tony, you've said this before, and I say this in all due respect. You don't like calling it mediation because you think it's too threatening. I mean, what are we going to call it? I mean, I've said this before. You know, I mentioned before. We could just call it the overtime maximization program. I will get them to come, but what are we talking about here, folks? You guys have two roles, primary roles: to investigate complaints so that officers who have engaged in misconduct can be disciplined, and to make from the complaints that you get what you can of possible policy and practice recommendations. You can do neither if the default position and the presumption is cases get mediated. Discipline does not happen. It's out the door categorically across the board. And secondly, because you don't do an investigation, you don't understand anything behind the complaint. Tracy, I hear you saying you'll have statistical information about the precinct, about race, about age. Yes, you will have that. You won't have an interview with a cop. You won't have interviews with witnesses. You won't have looked at videotape. You won't have listened to radio transmissions. You won't know anything that counts when it comes to figuring out whether or not there is a policy or practice problem. So I'm saying to you, and Richard, I understand your instincts about this, but you guys are going to be inviting a war if what you start doing is saying our business is to mediate complaints. It is not your business. It's not your business. Okay, at the tail end, on discipline, there continues to be a dupe problem, a significant dupe problem. It continues this month. But the thing I actually find much more alarming is what's happening with the APU cases. And Tracy, I'm only seeing this tonight, and you read some things, but I see two big things, which is the police commissioner is choosing not to discipline or not to accept the recommendation in a number of cases that are coming through. And then you have all these cases where he has retained the case, dismissed the case, and has imposed no discipline. I mean, I see them, in your report, them describing training as a form of discipline. That's not discipline. Nobody thinks that's discipline. Instructions are not discipline. So this is really the first time, as I understand it, that we have seen cases finally coming through the pipeline at the other end. And we are seeing what the police commissioner is doing with your completed APU cases. And this is an alarming indication of where this is going. And Richard, I have to tell you, I mean, setting aside people's unhappiness, which I can relate to and I understand, because I didn't know about your meetings either, and I'm really kind of disappointed you didn't invite me to come along. But setting aside people's alarm about that, I think there's every reason to worry about what is happening on the police department side about discipline. And if this is any indication where Commissioner Bratton thinks you should be going, this is an indication you should be deeply worried about. Because I see him just getting rid of your cases. We have the dupe problem. It is now just flipping over to the APU side. And you know, these 13 officers who have retained cases this past month, that's a very, very bad sign. All right, a couple final things, then I'm just going to sit down. The issue about prioritization, I said this last time, I'll say it again. I do not think it is appropriate for the CCRB to be deciding which complaints are more or less important. And I understand you may not agree with that characterization, but when I hear about this prioritization business, that's what I hear, and that's what the complainants are going to hear. If there are some small number of cases that need to be fast-tracked, I get that. You already have that at some level. But this whole notion of trying to categorize all complaints in a way such that some are going fast and some are going slow. I think that's a mistake. I think the much bigger focus should be making all investigations go faster. Investigations go way too slowly, and it may well be that the getting information out of the department is the single biggest barrier. Richard, I fear you will regret having said, if I don't get the data from the department quickly, I will quit, because the agency has been slugging that out with the police department for as long as I can recall, and Tony will tell you it's been since the beginning of time. And there's no question about it, if you could get stuff immediately or you had access to it, and you certainly have better access now than you had even 5 years ago. You could get this stuff in the first week, which you should be able to get. All of a sudden, the investigation timeline looks radically different. I said this last meeting, and I will say it again, there is no reason why virtually all of the complaints that you investigate, and keeping in mind, most of the complaints, or almost half the complaints, you do not investigate. There is no reason why the complaints you investigate cannot be completed within 3 months. Okay, you should get the information. You've got the complainant in there right from the get-go. You bring the cop in, and there's not that much more to be done. And, you know, people have talked about changing the culture of the agency, and there is a whole culture change that is required in terms of relations with the community. But there also has to be a culture change in terms of how quickly things can get done. And I will close by noting that there's one very good precedent for that. Okay. The annual report used to come out every year, 7, 8, 9 months into the year. The annual report this year, I think, came out, Jim, in February?
It was early.
Yeah, we had it in February, and then it was March where it was published to the public.
It came out very quick. Because, you know, we talked about it, we suggested some things that actually you could do instead of waiting until January 1st, and lo and behold, the annual report all of a sudden could come out within, you know, 6 weeks of the end of the year. There is no reason why complaints cannot be investigated much, much faster. It's good for the agency, it's good for the complainants, it's good for the cop, it's good for the prospect of discipline, and it gets you out of this box where what you are trying to do is to rejigger complaints in the name of prioritization, when what you should be doing is trying to expedite the entire process. Okay, thank you.
A couple of brief comments I have. Anybody else want to? The first thing is, I find it utterly ironic that you, knowing you and also knowing the NYCLU position, take the paternalistic view that complainants who want to mediate shouldn't be given that opportunity. They don't have to agree. Mediation is not, you're not forced to do anything. All you're asked to do is come to a meeting. You don't have to even do that. You can turn it down. But the notion that an individual is going to be deprived of that opportunity when we can make it available is antithetical to every civil liberties principle known to man.
I didn't hear myself saying anything about that, Richard.
Well, you did.
The agency should not make it the default position, as Jules said, that mediation is what happens.
What you're saying is
mediation, they can do mediation,
well,
of course.
I understand that, but what as a practical matter, if it isn't offered, they're not going to do it. The whole point is to offer it right up front, to schedule it, and then they can opt out of it. That's my view. I think it's paternalistic for you to impose your view that mediation is so so destructive to our function that we can't do what we're suggesting. Secondly, with respect to the APU, there's a lot of change that's hopefully going to happen. If it doesn't happen, you're going to be right about the carve-out rate and all the response rates of the police department to the APU charges and specs that don't ever get to a trial. That, I agree with you, has to change. But there are a couple of hopeful signs on the horizon in that respect. First of all, there's a huge distorting factor in all these cases that come from the stop and frisk cases. And the fact of the matter is that over 30 to 40% of the cases where charges and specs are coming down from the panels and going to APU are search cases, stop and frisk related cases of some sort. Those are going to obviously diminish greatly given the new stop and frisk statistics that we know about. Maybe that'll change in the future, but as of now, we have a holdover from 2012 and 2013 of stop and frisk cases that are still going to APU and going over to the police department. The fact of the matter is, if you think about it, Kelly was ordering people to do stop and frisks. There's no way the police department is going to discipline line officers for doing something that they're being ordered to do. And likewise, I suspect, and I don't know this for a fact, that Bratton is not going to hold officers, or going to often not hold officers unless they're aggravating factors, to stop and frisk when they've been ordered to do it.
That's not what these are.
Some of them are stop and frisk, a number of them.
3 of them are, the rest are not.
Well, there are a lot of stop and frisk relators. In any event, the reductions in penalties, the stop and frisk is driving a lot of the statistics. In any event, what I'm hopeful is that the communication on hierarchy of sanctions that is acceptable to both agencies is going to have an ameliorative effect on this unacceptable, I agree with you, unacceptable rate of lack of respect for our recommendations on both sides. We're going to do better we're going to do better outcomes, and we're going to do better recommendations, and they're going to respect them more if our processes are changed sufficiently to warrant the respect that we believe they should have. A couple of other things, but I'm not going to go into them now, too long. Let's have Beatrice Riley, please, who's the next person on the list.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
I just want to read to you what happened to me being an Irish American, married to a black man. So it does happen to white people. Everybody understand. It's probably right, but that's the undertone. On March 20th, 2013, a young man who lived with my family and I raised him. He was of African American descent. Came up to visit me from Virginia, which he does every once in a while. He called and said, "I'm coming up." I said, "All right, we'll make some dinner, sit down, my husband, my girls, whatever." We simply were rehashing old times growing up. I said, "Well, you want to see Bria's car?" Because the last time we saw Bria, she was a freshman in high school. So we said yes. So we all went outside. My husband went to the gas station. I went outside to my daughter's car. He looks in the window. The police officers, detectives surround me, asking me, and I'm getting upset because where's the drugs? Where's the guns? I said, "Excuse me? Where's the drugs? Where's the guns? Where's the weed? Where's the mollies?" Mollies? What? In any event, he told me to get out the car. I got out the car. He told me to put my hands like this. He dug in my pockets. I had on pajamas, the New York Knicks. Not that it matters, but I was going to St. John's while I was leaving to pick up my daughter from the shuttle bus. Goes in my pockets, he pulls out my crumpled money. He throws it in my daughter's car and tells me that I'm a drug dealer. And that was drug dealer money because it was crumpled. Not that he took it off my dresser. I was in my pajamas and I'm running. "Come on, Will, I'll see you later. I'm going to get Carol. Look at Bria's car." None of that. So they put me, from there, they took me and had me on the back of my daughter's vehicle with Will, the kid that I raised. Had my hands spread. Asked me, "Where's the drugs? Where's the guns? Where's the mollies?" etc. Took my key, broke the ignition on my car. Didn't realize it was a 1988 Camry. You have to press the button to release the key. Nor did he give me a chance to tell him that he's breaking my daughter's car. He told me, "Shut that." Whatever the case may be, I was verbally abused. Not only was I verbally abused, emotionally. I teach my children about racism every day. My daughter's going to be a doctor, Columbia University. My other daughter, computer engineer. Because I told them when they were young, if anybody ever calls you minority, you tell them your mother said there's nothing minor about you. but they do have an X on their back because they are Irish and African American. So I always inspire them with education, as my college educated husband and myself are. So but anyway, my daughter witnessed this. This is why it's bothering me, because I teach these children since they were babies to respect everyone. Always when they were little, I put their phone number inside the collar of their shirt. If you ever get lost, please look for a police officer. There's your phone number. Tell them it's on the inside of your sleeve, because people like to kidnap kids. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would have to go through this, what I went through. After that, I got searched in front of the Catholic school. I live in a condo building. I was searched in front of my building with every other condo owner. Looking out the window. If it wasn't for the doorman who witnessed it, who called my daughter to go get my husband, I wouldn't have no witnesses, because as we all know, the police, it's a union. Anybody who knows how in union, they stick together like this. I didn't see it. Did you see it, Paul? No, Charlie? You saw it? No. It's a union. I was in the union, and I was a supervisor. So I know exactly what union staff do and what supervisor staff do. I want to get to that in-servicing, because that's going to be next. Anyway, through the whole situation that I went through, they took the keys, they broke the ignition. After, he tells me, where do you know him from? I said, I raised him. We're like The Blind Side, if you guys ever saw that movie. I took him in. He said, yeah, okay, your green eyes, I guess you are related, because he happens to have green eyes. I said, excuse me? That's a racist remark. That is my family. My husband's black, my children are biracial, or they can pass for white, but that's another story. You are telling me that. I'm telling you that's my family, and you're telling me you could tell, oh yeah, what is it, the green eyes? That has nothing to do with what's going on here today. They were verbally abusive to me. They wasn't physical, but they were physical to Will. They had the handcuffs on. I said, please, you're hurting him. Why do you have him in handcuffs? Around his wrist, he had marks. He sent me pictures from Virginia where the email said, B, look what they did to my arms. And I said, please, can you unloosen up before you give the guy cut off the circulation, his blood pressure? You can have a heart attack. Anybody can. You, me, the next guy. Make a long story short, my daughter, which she should have filmed it, but she didn't. But I mean, the doorman was there. They, in this whole situation, told me, okay, I'm free to go. You're free to go. I said, well, why did you illegally search the trunk of my car? And why did you break my ignition? We didn't break ignition. I said, I need the keys. Now, I live on a hill, a condo building, with, you can't see when you're going up or going down. I need my keys to move the car. Mind you, my daughter's at St. John's waiting for me all this time from the shuttle. Where's my mother, my mother, my mother? I go to the 120th Street, say, I need my keys to the 88 Camry. I have to move the car. Someone is going to get hurt driving up the street because they're not going to see that car there. In the meantime, while I was there, my brothers put cones around the car. They don't know where my keys are. They don't know who the guys were, blah, blah, blah. It was freezing on March 22, 2013. It was freezing. My kids were locked out of the house because, of course, my daughter ran out, the other one, and saw what they were doing to her mother. I go back to the precinct. They have the nerve to tell me, listen, you're going to have to wait until tomorrow, till they come in from their tour. I said, wait, I wasn't even charged with anything. They accused me of everything in the world because I wasn't driving while being black. I was driving while knowing black, and that's a damn shame. When I left from out of there and went home, I had to call Papa. I paid $300. $300 to have them fix my car, fix the ignition. The next day, I was out. And it's a good thing I was, because I probably would have been arrested for the first time in my life. The detectives came to my house and told my daughter, the one who witnessed her mother being harassed and threatened. They told me if I didn't shut up, but I knew my rights, so I was speaking. And because when you're white, you have a better chance of speaking to the police than when you're black. I noticed. I've been with my husband for 26 years. When you're white, you have a better chance of speaking with the cops. And you do tend to get away with a little bit more than a black man asking, what are you arresting me for? Or why did you do this?
Tell the truth, man.
In any event, the detective came, two of them, knocked on my door. My daughter opened up the door. They said, "Is Beatrice here?" She said, "No." Now my daughter started shaking because of the ordeal that they put her mother through yesterday. And I always told her to have faith in police, have faith, always have faith, and have respect. I raised my children with all of that. My daughter says, "No, she's not. Why?" "Here's the keys. Tell your mother we're very sorry about what had transpired yesterday. They're very sorry that they tarnished who I am in front of my neighbors, my condo owners, the church, the Catholic Church. I grew up Catholic. I got searched by a female detective. They called to search me right there in front of the damn Catholic school to see if I had anything. And I was like, hey, you want my pants down? I'll show you everything right here, because I know I didn't do anything wrong. But I had a family member who was black. And he looked in the car to see the whole interior, because the outside was rusty. And I said, "Will, the outside of the car, it's our first car, it's a little rusty, but the inside is smooth, and it's 32,000 miles, so it's her first car. College, computer engineer, she works, this will be good for her." Little do we know that him peeking in the window like this, peeking in and say, "Wow, we just gonna like this," it would cause a disruption in my life for the rest of my life. And in my daughter's life. And in the doorman's life, who watched the whole scenario take place. And all my neighbors, who were totally, "Beatrice? She's retired, she's a grandmother. Beatrice? She's always going to the store, playing the numbers for this woman, helping the blind lady in the hallway with her clothes." Beatrice? Exactly. That's how I came, Beatrice. But for the first time, I knew what it was like to be of a different color, even though I'm in the skin I'm in. So something has to be done. Something. And as for the in-service, I was the supervisor. I was also a union member. On Richard's part, I have to stick up for him, because I was in the union and I was supervisor. When you're in the union, there's a whole bunch of steps. Verbal, written verbal, verbal, written with 1-day suspension, written with 2-day verbal suspension. There are numerous steps that you go through. As a supervisor, and I was on the Human Rights and Incident Review Board, when we have incidents brought to us, we were only able to make recommendations as to what should be done. Now, what the supervisor does is submit paperwork, instructional in-service. That's the best thing for everybody in this world. When they get in trouble, it's called in-service, with the minutes. First, let the person sign their name that they attended this in-service, while you provide it to the Incident Review Board that, yes, they did have the in-service, and they know that they cannot do this. Not, let's give this guy a 2-day suspension, whatever, because there's guidelines that you have to follow in the union. And on behalf of him, he has no control if Bratton has to follow what that KKK guy that runs the police union. We all know who he is. He's Irish just like me, but we know. I know as an Irish woman. Anyway, I'm going because I have to pick up my daughter from college. And she's probably saying, "Where's my mom?" I hope the NYPD didn't give her a shakedown. But I do hope that there's some type of change. And as for transparency, please don't say that word. leave that shit in Washington. Because it's been said, it's a political word. Nobody sees transparency. And whatever happened to the cop on the corner when I was a kid? Say, go home, the lights are on. He knew us. He knew everybody. Go home, the lights are on. Not sitting there saying, shut up. Right now, where's the drug? How dare you? How dare you do that? Demoralize me. In that case, I hope there's something that I want to get out of this.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Chris, you're not leaving.
Yeah, I'm leaving.
No, him. Hold on a second. We have a line here of people. Chloe Drew is next on this line. Are you? Okay. The other person that says yes on this line is Albert Nickerson. Albert Nickerson here? Sorry? The next is Donna Fagan.
Thank you for calling me. I actually have something a little off topic, but I did want to be here tonight and got here late from another meeting. I am a Staten Island resident. I am a resident of the 122 precinct. I do lots of community work, charity work, and fundraising. And I'm just here to compliment and say thank you to my precinct where I live. And I do work with a lot of youth in the area, and I can't say enough about them that they do their job very well in my precinct, which is the 122. And I thank you for moving the meetings from borough to borough. And that's basically it. I just speak a compliment to the way they conduct themselves and conduct business. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gary, I'm sorry, it's hard to read this. Fanoff? Sorry. Is that you? How do you say your last? How do you say your last name?
Thank you, Mr. Emery. My name is Gary Fanoff. I live 2 blocks in the South Shore from Officer Pantaleo. And I want to invite everybody. I want to recognize Ed Josie of the NAACP. Sylvia over here, my friend Doug, who have been every day since the chokehold, the death of Eric Gardner here, in what the Daily News referred to as the precinct from hell. Mr. Emery, you insist upon the chokehold legality with Mayor de Blasio's full backing. This in the wake of Eric Gardner. What a PR disaster. By coming here tonight, you are too clever by half. You think it's business as usual. We shall see. Apparently one Ferguson is not enough for you to wake up from your collective stupor common to those privileged, enjoying life at the top. Mr. Simonetti, I believe that for a very long period of years you were the leader of the 120 precinct from hell, correct?
I was the commanding officer of the 120 precinct in 1979. Yes, sir, and I'm very proud of it.
Well, they call it the precinct from hell at the Daily News. This is not a communist newspaper. This is not the final call put out by the Nation of Islam or, something offbeat, something out there in, left field. It's the Daily News run by Mortimer Zuckerman, who's always, Well, anyway, enough about. So, Simonetti, you were for another. Yeah, you were there, and you say you're proud. J'accuse, Simonetti. You go way back with Molinari and Molinaro and Donovan. And we demand that he be removed from this case now. Why? He gets money from the police unions, and not just that. Molinari, Molinaro, and Donovan, you're friends, right? You're friends, right? They gave a job in this building to the wife of the convicted Chuck Schwartz, right? Right? During the trial of Louima versus Schwartz. You remember that? See, Volpe lived in my hometown. Justin Volpe, the man with the stick up, I don't want to say it. And so, Jacques, Simonetti, Jacques. You're proud of the precinct from hell. Ha ha ha! I rest my case. You're proud.
Yeah. Sir, yes. Tell us your name and...
My name is Frank Stevens.
Frank Stevens. Yes, Mr. Stevens.
This is for Miss Tracy, because you was the director of the Criminal Civilian Review Board.
Yes, sir.
May 15, 2012, I got ran over by the police in front of my house. I got my ankle and my leg broken. And I got falsely arrested for impersonating myself. I got the papers right here. I got the medical papers right here. And you wrote me back and told me everything was unfounded.
That's their word.
How's that possible? I got my leg broken, my ankle broken.
That's their word.
And I got falsely arrested. I got everything right here. And you wrote me back and told me everything was unfounded, unsubstantiated. How's that possible? You had the medical report. You had the criminal complaint. How can I get arrested impersonating myself?
So would you want to make copies of this so we can look at
And
it?
I've been trying to get in contact with you for 2 years. I called you, and you know, you never asked you, how's that possible? You never gave me an explanation. You just ignored my call.
So we didn't work here in 2012.
Your name Tracy Capano?
No, it is.
Ain't this you right here?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So you had like that letter?
Yes, this
You
was
had
last
to,
year.
you had to confirm that.
Sir, I am happy to look into this.
Yeah, but I try to talk to you on the phone and have a meeting with you. I asked, how can that be possible? I got arrested for impersonating myself. My name is Frank Stevens. The officer locked me up for impersonating myself after they ran over me, broke my leg and broke my ankle. Here's the medical report right there.
Can we, officer, can we look at this and get back to you?
Yes.
I appreciate it.
And I wrote you a couple letters asking, I said, how's that? And then, in one of your complaints, I know you're investigated because I already said it was 2 officers, and you said it was 3 officers. So that tells me you could not investigate it. You had all evidence.
Sir, I am happy to look into this.
We will
and
look into
contact
that.
you. But could you put all of your contact
The names,
information on here?
everything's on in this complaint.
No, I know. I'm just saying, could you put your phone number or an email, whatever is the
Yes.
best way to reach you, sir? That would be wonderful, and I can contact you tomorrow with some information.
And are these the only copies you have?
I know I want to take your copies.
No, I got other copies. I got other copies.
Okay.
They had all this in the file, and I think my file got lost in Sandy's.
Let us take your name and number where we can contact you, okay? What is it? And put it on the record. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, all right.
I think that's the rest of the public business. That's the end of the public business. You have a comment? Yes, you may. Sorry, this gentleman, and then you can comment, sir. All right? I just saw him first. Sorry. But
Okay, Mr. Emery, thank you. Just a question and a comment. Firstly, you had mentioned earlier something to the effect that by the way, I'm Anthony Constantino, first vice chair of Community Board 1, and I just am asking for a clarification so I could better understand. You mentioned use of physical use of authority, power rather, would eventually, I believe, lead up to the choke, abuse of power, and vice versa. You mentioned something more in that line. I just wondered if you're using Formental or private psychologists to develop this theory.
it's purely statistical. The findings that we expect will come out in the chokehold report show that there's a disproportionate number of physical abuse complaints and CCRB complaints generally for those officers where there are chokehold allegations. and that's really the point I was making. There's no underlying psychological analysis of it.
It's simple enough, thank you. And if you'd like to, as the first vice chair of Community Board of One, we cover from Verrazano Bridge to the Goethals Bridge, everything off the highway, the old geographical area of the 120, which is now 120 and 121. And we have, under my committee, I could host you. If you'd like to have a meeting at One Edgewater Plaza in the future, and we could accommodate a larger space upstairs also.
Well, we're going to continue to do this, so that's a great offer. So Brian Connolly.
Use my card.
Please.
On completion.
Great.
And I have a sore throat, so pardon me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sir, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes. My name is Doug Brinson. I'm a longtime resident of Staten Island, like 38 years. I'm like 20 years over on Victory and Bay alone. I'm just going to pick up something what the gentleman said just now. I just want to say one thing about this Citizen Review Board, that you always use the word unfounded. You used the word twice with me on an incident that I had with my grandson. It made my grandson, the police officer made my grandson sit in an invisible chair. Oh yeah, an invisible chair. He had to sit there for maybe an hour because they punished him. I put in a complaint with the Citizen Review Board. They found unfounded. Are you ever going to find another word besides unfounded? And to kick on something else with Officer Pantaleo, which I think should be locked up right now in jail for murder. His name has come up on a few occasions. It came up today. He told me an incident where she was called downstairs by her friend. And she went downstairs. Her friend gave her a bag of fish. She's going back upstairs. And while she's going back upstairs, some officers see her. They follow the young lady upstairs. She got her pajamas on. They want ID. She don't have any ID. They searches her up. She's a female. They searches her up. She had a napkin and she had a little bud in there. So the officers start going crazy, saying, okay, that's enough. That's enough to take you in. We're locking you up. Officer Pandaleo is his name. This guy has been wilding for a long time. I don't understand how can an officer get to be so wild and so crazy and everybody know it, and you don't say it until he kills somebody. He murdered my friend, and he's still working. He had a lot going against him. He shouldn't have been there. And when does it stop? When does y'all take the time to say, okay, I don't understand what the Citizen Review Board is for. You just look at cases and say unfounded. You don't penalize nobody. You just have people like me saying, you guys don't do nothing. And that's what leads into this. So we get a city councilman, Debbie Rose. And I tell her my problem, because I was locked up by, if I'm not mistaken, Officer Pandaleo that told me to stay off of Victory Boulevard when they let me go the next morning. Stay off of Victory and Bay. I went to my city council. I told her what happened. Even when it happened to Eric Gardner, I told him to go to Debbie Rose and tell him what happened. So maybe she'll do something about it. None of this was something. I mean, why do you go to your leaders if they're not going to say nothing about what's going on until it lands up into somebody's dead? He went to her. Nobody done nothing. Were we left out here alone? We have nobody to help us, nobody to protect us. When we go to them with problems that we have from our community, the police in our community, which is all white. I've been in this area for over 20 years, never seen a black officer posted. What's wrong with black officers? I mean, post them up so we can see them. I mean, they might be bad like the white officers, at least we got them. Okay? I mean, let us see them. Where are they? You hiding them? Where are they? I mean, I don't understand. Why is it going on like this? And it's been going on like this for a while. And once they single you out, you're done. And they singled me out on Victory Boulevard. They locked me up and told me to stay off of Bay Street. The only thing that took the pressure off me was Eric Gardner. When they seen him, they got off of me. Okay? Now, something should have been done when I complained about it. My city council should have went to somebody, because I stepped to her with a problem I had. and it didn't go no further. And that's what happened to Eric Garner. You know, and I just want y'all to know that. Y'all gotta do a better job. If you can't do a better job, you need to get off the pot.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to adjourn. We're going to have an executive session for a short time if everybody's willing to stay a little bit longer. It's late, but there are personnel matters we have to discuss in an executive session. And we can do that here after the room is cleared, I think. Thank you all.